My brother died pulling 3 children from a burning building on Moreno Street. They gave him a hero's funeral, a folded flag, and a plot in the municipal cemetery. His widow remarried 6 months later to Roberto Silva, the fire chief who signed off on the investigation. The same man who determined Martin's death was an accident. Nothing more, just terrible luck and bad timing. Then she sold his medals on eBay. I'm holding the evidence in my hands right now, standing in her living room, while she stares at me like I'm the ghost of Christmas past come to haunt her. The blue velvet box trembles between my fingers. Inside, 3 pieces of metal that meant everything to my brother: the 25-year service medal, the Valor Commendation from the car fire in 2018, and the posthumous award they presented at his funeral for supreme sacrifice. Turn it over, I tell her. My voice doesn't sound like my own. It's cold, flat, empty of everything except the weight of what I know. The 25-year medal. Turn it over. Patricia's hands shake as she reaches for it. She's wearing that cream sweater Martin gave her, the one from their last anniversary, and somehow that makes this worse. Makes everything worse. Her fingers close around the metal, and I watch her face as she flips it over and sees the engraving on the back. The engraving that wasn't there when the fire department issued it. The engraving that someone added later. Her face goes white, not pale, white. The color of bone, of ash, of lies exposed to daylight. "Where did you?" she whispers, and her voice breaks like glass. "I bought them," I say. $800. I bid against 11 other people for my own brother's medals. The ones you listed as vintage firefighter memorabilias, like they were fucking garage sale junk. Luciano, I can explain. Can you? I take a step closer. Can you explain why you sold them at all? Can you explain why you're wearing his sweater while his replacement is probably upstairs in his bed? Can you explain what the hell this says? I point at the medal in her trembling hands, at the words engraved in neat, precise letters on the back. Words that change everything. She opens her mouth, closes it, opens it again. "You don't understand," she finally manages. "Then make me understand. Tell me what these words mean, Patricia. Tell me why someone would engrave this on the back of Martin's medal. Tell me why—" The front door opens. Roberto Silva fills the doorway, still in his fire chief uniform, the one with the brass buttons and the badges that mean he's important, that he's in charge, that he decides what's true and what isn't when firefighters die. He sees me, sees the medals, sees Patricia's face, and I see something flicker in his eyes. Just for a second, something that looks an awful lot like fear. "Luciano," he says carefully, like I'm a bomb that might go off. "What's going on here?" I hold up the medal so he can see it, so he can see what I found. "You tell me, Chief. You tell me what this means." But wait, stop. I'm getting ahead of myself, and if I don't tell you how I got here, you won't understand why this matters. You won't understand what I'm holding, what it means, what it proves. You won't understand why my hands are shaking so hard I can barely keep hold of this box. Why Patricia looks like she might throw up. Why Roberto Silva just took 3 steps backward toward the door. Let me start from the beginning. Let me tell you about November 23rd, 2023, the day my brother died, the day everything changed. Because what I found engraved on that medal, what I'm about to show you, it's going to blow your mind. It's going to make you question everything you thought you knew about heroes and widows and the men who investigate suspicious deaths. So let me take you back. Back to that morning when the phone rang at 5:15 and my world ended. Back to before I knew about the medals. Before I knew about Roberto, before I knew that some fires don't just destroy buildings, they destroy the truth. The phone was ringing. That's the first thing I remember about the worst day of my life. Not the time, not the weather, not what I was dreaming about before. Just the phone ringing and ringing in the pre-dawn darkness of my bedroom. That specific ringtone. That means someone needs to reach you now, immediately, because something has gone terribly wrong. I fumbled for it on the nightstand, knocking over a glass of water in the process. The screen said 5:17 a.m., Tuesday, November 23rd. The cold water soaked into the carpet, but I didn't care because Patricia's name was flashing on the screen, and nobody calls at 5:17 in the morning unless the world is ending. "Hello?" My voice came out thick with sleep and confusion. The sound that came through the phone wasn't quite human. It was a wail, a sob, a keening noise that made every hair on my body stand up. Patricia, I sat up fast, too fast, my head spinning. Next to me, Clara stirred and opened her eyes. Patricia, what's wrong? What happened? He's gone. 2 words. That's all it took. 2 words to destroy everything. Luciano, he's gone. Martin is gone. The phone slipped through my fingers and clattered onto the hardwood floor. I could still hear her crying, her voice tinny and distant coming from the fallen phone, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she'd just said because it couldn't be true. It couldn't be. Martin couldn't be gone. Martin was invincible. Clara grabbed the phone from the floor. I heard her talking, but couldn't make out the words. Everything sounded like I was underwater, like the whole world had been submerged, and I was drowning in the new reality where my brother didn't exist anymore. Luciano, Clara's hand on my face, forcing me to look at her. Luciano, we need to go. We need to go to St. Mark's Hospital right now. He's not dead, I heard myself say. She's wrong. She's confused. He can't be dead. But I was already getting dressed, pulling on yesterday's jeans, a t-shirt, shoes without socks. Clara was throwing on clothes, grabbing her keys, her phone, moving with purpose while I moved like a zombie, like my body knew what to do, even though my brain had shut down completely. The drive to the hospital is a blur. I remember streetlights. I remember Clara running a red light. I remember the dashboard clock changing from 5:23 to 5:24 to 5:25, each minute an eternity, each minute bringing me closer to a truth I didn't want to face. St. Mark's Hospital loomed out of the early morning darkness like a monument to human suffering. 6 stories of concrete and glass where people came to be saved, and where sometimes they came to die. The emergency entrance was lit up like a stage, bright lights that hurt my eyes, that made everything too real, too sharp, too undeniable. Patricia was in the waiting room. I'll never forget how she looked in that moment. She was wearing pink flannel pajamas with little flowers on them, the kind you wear when you're planning to stay home all day, when you're planning to be comfortable and safe and nowhere near a hospital at 5 in the morning. She had Martin's fire department jacket thrown over her shoulders, the one with his name embroidered on the chest. Her hair was wild, uncombed, and her face, God, her face looked like someone had carved it out of grief. She saw me and let out a sound that wasn't quite a word, just this broken animal noise. And then she was in my arms, and we were both crying, holding each other up. 2 people who loved Martin more than anything, trying to figure out how the world could keep spinning when he'd stopped. What happened? I managed to ask when I could form words again. Patricia, what happened? Fire, she choked out. Apartment building on Moreno Street. Old building, 4 stories. There were children trapped on the 4th floor. 3 children. He went in. The roof, her voice cracked completely. The roof came down. By the time they pulled him out, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. Monica, Patricia's older sister, materialized at her side. I hadn't even noticed her there. She was holding 2 cups of coffee that nobody was going to drink, her own eyes red and swollen. They did everything they could, Monica said quietly. The doctors, the nurses, but the smoke inhalation was too severe, and the burns. And when the roof collapsed, there was head trauma, internal injuries. He fought, Luciano, he fought for 3 hours. But his body just, it was too much. Claire's hand found mine, squeezed. The only thing keeping me tethered to reality. Can I see him? The words came out of my mouth, but I wasn't sure who was speaking. Couldn't be me. I was somewhere else in some other timeline where this wasn't happening. Patricia nodded. Room 347, 3rd floor. The nurse said family can go in to say goodbye. Goodbye. Such a small word for such a final thing. I took the elevator alone. Clara offered to come, but I shook my head. This was something I needed to do by myself. The elevator was playing soft music, something classical and soothing that made me want to punch the speakers. How dare the world be soothing right now? How dare anything be soft or gentle when Martin was dead? The 3rd floor hallway smelled like antiseptic and death. A nurse with kind eyes and tired face pointed me toward room 347. Her hand briefly touched my shoulder as I passed, a gesture of comfort that meant nothing and everything. I stood outside the door for a long time, maybe 30 seconds, maybe 10 minutes. Time had lost all meaning, because once I walked through that door, it would be real. Once I saw him, I couldn't unsee it. Couldn't pretend this was all a terrible dream, but I opened the door anyway. The room was dim, just one small light over the bed. Medical equipment beeped softly, even though there was no longer anyone to monitor. Martin lay in the bed, covered to his chest with a white sheet. He looked like he was sleeping. If you didn't look too close, if you didn't see the burns on his arms, the bandages on his neck, the unnatural stillness of his chest. I pulled a chair close to the bed, sat down, took his hand. It was still warm. That detail broke me. That his body hadn't had time to go cold yet. That just a few hours ago this hand had been moving, working, saving lives. That this morning he'd probably made coffee, kissed Patricia goodbye, headed off to the fire station, thinking it would be just another shift. "You idiot," I whispered. "You stupid, brave idiot. Why'd you have to be the hero? Why'd you always have to be the one who runs in when everyone else is running out?" He didn't answer, would never answer again. I sat there for an hour, maybe more, holding his hand, talking to him about nothing and everything, reminding him of when we were kids and built that treehouse in the backyard that collapsed the first time we tried to use it, about his wedding day when he was so nervous he threw up twice before the ceremony, about the time he taught my daughter Emma to ride a bike and ran alongside her for 3 hours until she got it, even though he'd just worked a double shift and was dead on his feet, about how he was supposed to be here, how he was supposed to grow old and annoying and tell the same stories over and over at family dinners, how he was supposed to be at Emma's graduation, her wedding, hold his nieces and nephews, and tell them terrible jokes that made them groan, about how none of this was fair. Finally, a nurse came in, different one, younger, with sad eyes that said she'd done this too many times. "I'm sorry," she said softly, "but we need to, there are procedures. Other family members are waiting to see him." I nodded, stood up, looked at my brother one last time. "I love you, Martin," I said. "I love you, and I'm going to miss you every single day for the rest of my life." I kissed his forehead. It was still warm. Then I walked out of that room and left my brother behind forever. The next few days existed in a fog. There were decisions to make, papers to sign, a funeral to plan. Mom collapsed at the funeral home and had to be taken to the emergency room. Panic attack, they said, which was the medical term for a mother's heart breaking because she had to bury her son. Dad didn't cry once, just stood there like a statue, staring at nothing, saying nothing. The funeral was massive. Hundreds of people packed into Holy Cross Church on a Monday morning that felt more like evening, everything gray and heavy and wrong. The mayor came. 3 news crews, Martin's entire fire company in dress uniform, and the parents of the 3 children he'd saved, who stood in the back and cried silently, because how do you thank someone for dying for your kids? What words exist for that? Chief Roberto Silva gave the eulogy. I remember that now, sitting here in Patricia's living room with the medal in my hand. I remember standing in that church numb with grief, watching this tall, imposing man in his dress uniform walk to the podium. He had a strong voice. I remember thinking, commanding, the kind of voice you'd want to hear telling you everything was going to be okay even when it wasn't. Martin Reyes was the kind of firefighter we all aspire to be, he'd said. Brave, dedicated, selfless. On November 23rd, he made the ultimate sacrifice. He gave his life so that 3 children could live. Sofia Mendoza, age 7, Bruno and Matias Castillo, age 5. They're alive today because Martin Reyes decided their lives were worth more than his own. Everyone cried. Patricia sobbed so hard her sister had to hold her up. I sat there dry-eyed, beyond tears, listening to this man I barely knew describe my brother like he understood him, like he'd been there, like he knew what Martin was thinking in those last moments when the roof came down and the fire closed in. And at the end, Chief Silva presented Patricia with the flag, folded in that perfect triangle, crisp and formal. He handed it to her with white-gloved hands and said, On behalf of a grateful city, please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your husband's faithful service." Patricia had clutched that flag like it was the last piece of Martin she'd ever hold. If only I'd known then what I know now. If only I'd looked closer at the way Roberto Silva's hand lingered on Patricia's shoulder just a fraction too long. At the way his eyes found hers in that crowded church. At the way she leaned into his touch, just slightly like a flower bending toward the sun. But I didn't see it, was too lost in my own grief to see anything. The weeks after the funeral were a slow-motion nightmare. I went back to work because I didn't know what else to do. Sat at my desk at the accounting firm, where I'd worked for 12 years and stared at spreadsheets without seeing them. Numbers that used to mean something now felt meaningless. Everything felt meaningless. Clara tried to help. She made my favorite foods that I couldn't eat. She held me when I finally broke down crying at 2 in the morning. She fielded calls from concerned friends and family members, so I didn't have to explain over and over that no, I wasn't okay and no, there was nothing anyone could do. I called Patricia every few days, just to check in, make sure she was surviving. The conversations were brief, awkward. We'd never been particularly close. She was Martin's wife, I was Martin's brother, and that was the extent of our relationship. But now we were bonded by loss. Two people trying to figure out how to exist in a world without him. "How are you doing?" I'd ask. "Okay," she'd lie, taking it day by day. "If you need anything, I know, thank you." And that would be it. 30 seconds of mutual grief, and then back to our separate corners of hell. Christmas came. We gathered at my parents' house like we did every year, except Martin's chair was empty, and nobody wanted to acknowledge it. Patricia came but looked like a ghost, pale and thin, and barely present. She'd brought Martin's favorite apple pie, and the sight of it sitting on the dessert table made Mom start crying and have to leave the room. "I'm sorry," Patricia said to everyone and no one. "I thought it would be nice to have something he loved. I didn't mean to upset anyone." "It's fine," Dad said, which was the most he'd said all day. It wasn't fine, nothing was fine, but we all pretended. Because that's what you do at holidays when someone's missing. You pretend the absence isn't a black hole in the center of the room, sucking all the joy and light into it. After dinner, I found Patricia in the kitchen, washing dishes that didn't need washing. "You don't have to do that," I said. "I need to do something with my hands," she replied without looking at me. "If I stop moving, I start thinking, and if I start thinking—" She didn't finish, but I understood. "Have you thought about seeing someone?" I asked. "A therapist?" Monica keeps suggesting it. I don't know. Feels like admitting defeat. Grief isn't something you're supposed to power through alone. She finally looked at me then, and her eyes were full of something I couldn't quite name. Sadness, yes, but something else too, something harder. "Maybe," she said, "after the holidays." But I don't think she ever did. I think she found another way to not be alone. January brought the new year, 2024, and with it the slow, painful process of learning to live with loss. I went through the motions. Work, home, sleep, repeat. Emma needed help with her homework. Clara needed help with the gutters. Life didn't stop just because my heart was broken. I started calling Patricia less. Once a week, usually Sunday afternoons, the conversations got shorter, more stilted. "How's work?" I'd ask. She'd gone back to her job at the public library in early January. "Fine, busy, you know. How are you holding up?" "Better, getting better." And I believed her because I wanted to believe her, because it was easier than digging deeper, than asking the hard questions, than really seeing what was happening. But then came February 26th. Clara and I were at the grocery store, a mundane Saturday afternoon errand. We were in the produce section, debating whether organic apples were worth the extra $2, when Clara suddenly grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. "Luciano," she hissed, "is that Patricia?" I looked where she was pointing, and there she was, my brother's widow, standing by the dairy section. She wasn't alone. A man stood next to her, tall and broad-shouldered, with close-cropped gray hair. He was saying something that made her laugh, actually laugh, her head thrown back, eyes sparkling. As we watched, frozen in the produce aisle, he put his hand on the small of her back, an intimate gesture. Familiar, and she leaned into it naturally, comfortably, like they'd done this 1,000 times before. "Who is that?" Clara whispered. "I don't know," I said, but something about him tickled my memory. I'd seen him before. Where had I seen him? They moved through the store together, this man and my brother's widow, picking out groceries like any other couple on any other Saturday. She picked up a box of cereal and showed it to him. He nodded, smiled, added it to their cart. Their cart? Not her cart. Their cart. They checked out together. He paid. They left together, walking out into the parking lot with their bags. Still talking, still touching. Claire and I stood there like idiots, our own cart abandoned, the organic apples forgotten. "Maybe it's just a friend," Claire said, but her voice held no conviction. "Maybe," I echoed. But I knew, some part of me knew right then that this was something else. Something that would matter. Something that would hurt. I called Patricia that night. She didn't answer. I called again on Sunday. No answer. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, straight to voicemail every time. Finally, on Thursday, she called back. "Sorry," she said, and she did sound sorry. Guilty, even. "I've been meaning to call you back. Things have been hectic." "Who was that man you were with at the grocery store?" I asked without preamble. Silence, long, damning silence. "What?" she finally said. "Saturday? Ralph's? You were with a man? Who was he?" "Were you following me?" Her voice had an edge now. "No, Patricia. We were buying groceries. We saw you. Who was he?" More silence. I could hear her breathing, could practically hear her brain working, trying to figure out what to say. "A friend from work," she said finally. "We ran into each other, decided to shop together. It's not a big deal." Everything about her tone said it was a big deal. "Okay," I said, because what else could I say? "I just wanted to check in, make sure you're doing all right." "I'm fine, Luciano, really. I'm doing better." We said goodbye. I hung up, and I knew she'd lied to me. It was my mother who confirmed it. She called 3 weeks later, on a Thursday evening in mid-March. I was helping Emma with her math homework, long division that neither of us really understood, when my phone rang. "Did you know?" Mom demanded without saying hello. "Know what?" "About Patricia." She spat the name like it tasted rotten. "About her and Roberto Silva." Roberto Silva. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. That's where I'd seen him, at the funeral. Chief Roberto Silva, who'd given the eulogy, who'd investigated Martin's death, who'd handed Patricia that folded flag with his white-gloved hands and his words of condolence. "What about them?" I asked, even though I already knew, had known since I saw them in the grocery store. Really, had just been in denial. "They're together," Mom said. And I could hear tears in her voice. Tears and rage in equal measure, Monica told me. Apparently, Patricia was planning to make some kind of announcement at Sunday dinner. She's dating him. The fire chief. It's been going on since February. February, 3 months after Martin died. 3 months? Mom, I started, but she cut me off. 3 months. Luciano. Your brother hasn't even been gone 4 months, and she's already replaced him with the man who investigated his death. How is that not suspicious? How is that not... Mom, slow down. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. Her voice rose sharp with grief and fury. My son is dead. His widow couldn't even wait half a year before jumping into bed with another man. And not just any man, the fire chief. The man who signed off on the investigation. The man who determined there was no negligence, no one to blame. How convenient that he's now dating the widow. How very, very convenient. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting, Mom said, and her voice dropped to something cold and hard, that maybe we shouldn't take his word for what happened that night. Maybe someone should look a little closer at how that fire started, at whether the right procedures were followed, at whether my son died because of an accident or because of someone's incompetence that got swept under the rug. Mom, that's crazy? Am I crazy, Luciano? Then tell me why the fire chief is sleeping with the widow. Tell me why she couldn't wait even 6 months. Tell me why this doesn't feel wrong in every possible way. I couldn't tell her any of those things, because it did feel wrong. It felt like a betrayal, like an insult to Martin's memory, like something rotten at the core. I'll talk to her, I said. You do that, and while you're at it, ask her how she can sleep at night. Mom hung up. I sat there with the phone in my hand, Emma looking at me with worried eyes. Is Grandma okay? She asked. She's sad, baby, I said, about Uncle Martin. I'm sad about Uncle Martin, too, Emma said softly. I miss him. Me too, sweetheart, me too. I drove to Patricia's house that night, didn't call ahead, didn't give her warning, just got in my car at 8:30 and drove across town to the modest two-bedroom house where she and Martin had lived for 8 years. There were two vehicles in the driveway, her sedan and a truck I didn't recognize but could guess who it belonged to. I rang the doorbell once, twice. Finally, Patricia answered, wearing yoga pants and an oversized t-shirt, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked comfortable, relaxed, happy even, until she saw me. Luciano, she said, and all the color drained from her face. What are you doing here? We need to talk. This isn't a good time. I don't care. Behind her, a figure appeared, Roberto Silva, in jeans and a button-down shirt rolled to the elbows, looking every inch like he belonged there. In my brother's house, with my brother's wife. Is there a problem? He asked, stepping up behind Patricia, his hand automatically going to her shoulder in a protective gesture that made my blood boil. Yeah, I said, there's a problem. Can I come in? Patricia looked at Roberto. He nodded slightly. She stepped aside. The living room was exactly as I remembered it from when I'd helped Patricia pack up Martin's things 3 months ago, except now there were signs of another presence. A man's jacket on the coat rack, work boots by the door, a coffee mug on the side table that was definitely not Patricia's floral pattern. So it's true, I said, not bothering to sit down. You're together. Luciano, Patricia started. 3 months, I interrupted. Martin has been dead for 3 months and 9 days, and you've already moved on to the fire chief. To the man who investigated his death. It's not what you think, Patricia said weakly. Then what is it? Please enlighten me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my brother died and you couldn't wait to replace him. That's not fair. Roberto spoke up. His voice calm, measured, the voice of authority. Your brother's death was a tragedy, but Patricia is entitled to find happiness again. Oh, you think so? That's very generous of you, Chief Silva. Tell me, when did this happiness start? Was it at the funeral when you handed her that flag? Was it during your investigation when you decided there was nothing suspicious about the fire that killed my brother? Luciano, stop, Patricia said, and now there were tears in her eyes. You're being cruel. I'm being cruel? You sold his medals, Patricia. His medals. On eBay. Like garbage. Her face went white. How did you know about that? Because I bought them, I said, and pulled the box from my jacket pocket. $800. I bid against 11 other people for my brother's medals, for the proof of his 32 years of service, for the only tangible things left that showed the world who he was and what he did. Patricia sat down heavily on the couch. Roberto remained standing, his jaw tight, his eyes calculating. I needed the money, Patricia whispered. The house, the bills, I couldn't. Don't, I cut her off. Don't you dare try to justify this. You have a job. Martin had life insurance. You could have asked for help. You could have done literally anything except sell the one thing that represented his entire career, his entire legacy on the fucking internet. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm sorry, okay? I made a mistake. I was angry and hurt, and I wasn't thinking clearly. Clearly, I agreed. You weren't thinking clearly when you sold them. Just like you weren't thinking clearly when you started dating the fire chief 3 months after your husband died. But I wonder, Patricia, I wonder when it really started. Was it really February, or was it before? Roberto took a step forward. That's enough. You need to leave. I'll leave when I'm ready, I shot back. Tell me something, Chief. Your investigation into Martin's death. How thorough was it? Extremely thorough, he said, his voice hardening. We followed every protocol, examined every piece of evidence. Your brother died a hero. It was a tragic accident. Was it? Or was it incompetence? Poor equipment? Ignored safety violations in that building? Did you really investigate everything? Or did you do just enough to close the case quickly and make everyone feel better? You're grieving, Roberto said. I understand that, but you're crossing a line. Am I? Or am I just asking the questions everyone else is too polite to ask? Like why you're sleeping with my brother's widow less than 4 months after his death? Like why she sold his medals? And when, like what the hell you two are really hiding? We're not hiding anything, Patricia said, but her voice wavered. No? I opened the velvet box. Then tell me about these. I took out the medals one by one. The 25-year service medal, the Valor Medal, the posthumous award. I laid them on the coffee table between us like evidence in a trial. Look familiar? I asked. Patricia stared at them, fresh tears streaming down her face. Here's what I don't understand, I continued. These medals were presented to Martin over years. Ceremonies, celebrations, moments of pride. He kept them in a drawer. Sure, but he kept them, he valued them. They mattered to him, and yet you put them up for sale like they were nothing. Like 32 years could be reduced to $800. I told you I needed. But that's not even the interesting part, I interrupted. The interesting part is what I found when they arrived. See, when I opened the box and looked at them, really looked at them, I noticed something on the back of one of them, something that wasn't there when the fire department issued it. Patricia's hands started shaking. An engraving, I said softly. Someone had an engraving added to the back of the 25-year service medal. Recent, by the look of it. The style is different from the official engraving on the front. Personal, intimate. Luciano, please, Patricia whispered. What does it say? Roberto asked, and his voice was tight now, controlled in a way that made my instincts scream. I picked up the medal, held it so they could both see the front, the official seal, the date, Martin's name. You want to know what it says? I asked. You really want to know what someone thought was important enough to engrave on the back of my brother's medal? Patricia was crying openly now, her whole body shaking. Turn it over, I said to her. Go ahead. Read it out loud. Read what you had engraved. I didn't, she started, but I cut her off. Don't lie. The shop confirmed it. You brought in the medals 2 weeks before you listed them for sale. You had this one engraved. You paid extra for rush service. And then you put them online, probably hoping no one in the family would ever see them. Never know what you'd done. I turned the medal over so they could both see the back. The engraving was small but clear, etched in neat script across the metal surface. It said, For Roberto, all my love, Patricia. The room went silent, the kind of silence that comes after a bomb goes off, when everyone's still trying to figure out if they're alive or dead. Patricia's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Roberto's face had gone carefully blank, his fire chief mask sliding into place. What the hell is this? I asked quietly. Why would you engrave a message to your boyfriend on my brother's medal? Why would you? And that's when I saw it. The look that passed between them, quick, frightened, guilty. That's when I understood. Oh my God, I said. How long? How long have you two been together? Luciano, Patricia reached for me, but I stepped back. How long? I shouted, and they both flinched. Since January, Patricia whispered. Since January, I repeated. 2 months after Martin died. 2 months after your husband, my brother, the father you never had, died saving 3 children from a burning building. 2 months. I'm sorry, she sobbed. But I was looking at Roberto now, really looking at him, at the way he stood, protective, between me and Patricia, at the way his hand had found her shoulder again, at the comfortable, familiar way they moved around each other. Unless, I said slowly, unless it wasn't 2 months, unless it was longer than that. Don't, Roberto said, and there was a warning in his voice now. How much longer, Patricia? I asked. When did it really start? Was it before Martin died? Were you having an affair while my brother was out risking his life every day? No, Patricia shouted. No, it wasn't like that. I loved Martin. Did you? I asked. Because I'm starting to wonder. I'm starting to wonder about a lot of things. Like why you sold his medals with a love note to another man engraved on them. Like why you moved on so fast. Like why the fire chief's investigation wrapped up so quickly, so neatly, with no questions asked. My investigation was thorough and by the book, Roberto said coldly. Was it? Or did you just want to close the case so you could move on with your life? With my brother's wife? You need to leave, Roberto said. Now, I'll leave when I'm damn well ready. Patricia, look at me. I waited until she raised her tear-stained face. Did you have this engraved before or after Martin died? She didn't answer. Patricia, before or after? After, she whispered. I swear, after, in January, when we got together. But you knew him before you'd met before. At the funeral, she said quickly. We met at Martin's funeral. Did you? It wasn't a question. Yes. He gave the eulogy. He presented me with the flag. We talked afterward. He was kind. He understood what I was going through because he'd lost someone too. His first wife died 5 years ago. Cancer. He understood grief, understood loss. And you what? You bonded over your dead spouses? Is that what you're telling me? It wasn't like that, Roberto said. I reached out to Patricia in January to check on her, to make sure she was managing. It's something I do for all the families. All the families? I laughed, sharp and bitter. Do you date all of them too? Is that part of your follow-up service? Luciano, please, Patricia begged. But I was on a roll now, pieces clicking into place. A picture forming that I didn't want to see but couldn't look away from. The fire, I said. Tell me about the fire, the one that killed Martin. What about it? Roberto asked carefully. Old building, you said. The report said it was faulty wiring, electrical fire that started in the basement, spread quickly due to age of the structure and lack of proper fire safety measures. That's correct. And whose responsibility was it to cite that building for fire safety violations? The fire marshal's office conducts regular inspections. Your office, I interrupted. Your department. So when was the last time that building was inspected? Roberto's jaw tightened. I don't have that information off the top of my head. Bullshit. You're the fire chief. You investigated the scene. You wrote the report. You know exactly when it was last inspected and what violations were found. The building had been cited for several safety issues over the past 2 years, Roberto admitted. The landlord had been given deadlines to address them. Had he? Some of them. Which ones? The ones he could afford. So there were still violations when the fire started, known violations. Safety issues that your department knew about and apparently decided weren't important enough to enforce. It's not that simple. Isn't it? Because it sounds pretty simple to me, Chief. It sounds like someone dropped the ball. Someone didn't follow up, didn't enforce the codes, didn't do their job, and 3 kids almost died because of it. My brother did die because of it. That's not fair, Patricia said. You don't understand the budget constraints, the staffing issues, I understand that Martin is dead, I said flatly. I understand that he died in a building that should have been condemned or brought up to code. I understand that the man who oversaw that failure is now sleeping in my brother's bed. Get out, Roberto said, and his voice had gone cold. Get out of this house right now before I have you removed. You going to call the cops? Have me arrested for asking questions? That'll look great in the papers. Fire Chief silences dead hero's brother. Luciano, please. Patricia stood up, wiping at her face. Please just go. You're upset. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly, I said. For the first time in months, I'm thinking clearly, and I'm wondering who I can talk to about getting a second investigation into that fire. An independent investigation. One not conducted by someone with a personal interest in the outcome. Roberto went very still. There's nothing to investigate. The report is final. Reports can be reopened, especially if there's evidence of conflict of interest, of impropriety. There was no conflict of interest. I didn't even know Patricia when. Didn't you? I asked softly. Are you sure about that? Because I'm starting to wonder. I'm starting to wonder about timelines, about when you really met, About why my brother's widow sold his medals with your name engraved on them. The engraving doesn't prove anything, Patricia said desperately. I had it added in January, I told you. Did you? Or is that just what you want me to believe? Because here's what I'm thinking, Patricia. I'm thinking maybe you knew Roberto before Martin died. Maybe you two had something going on. Maybe that's why his investigation was so quick, so clean. Maybe that's why he was so eager to close the case and declare it an accident. Because if it wasn't an accident, if it was negligence, incompetence, then there would be questions, lawsuits, liability. His career would be over. But if it was just a tragic accident, well then nobody's to blame, are they? That's insane, Roberto said. Is it? Then explain the medals. Explain why she'd have your name put on Martin's medal unless you two were already together, unless you meant something to each other before he died. I told you, I don't believe you, I said simply. I don't believe either of you, and I'm going to find out the truth. I'm going to request a copy of that fire inspection report. I'm going to talk to the other firefighters who were there that night. I'm going to find out exactly what happened and who's responsible. You're wasting your time, Roberto said. Maybe, or maybe I'm about to expose the fact that the fire chief let a building burn because he was too busy screwing the widow of the man who died in it. Patricia slapped me. The crack of her palm against my cheek echoed in the silent room. My head snapped to the side, more from surprise than impact. How dare you, she hissed. How dare you come into my home and accuse me of your home? I turned back to her, my cheek stinging. This was Martin's home. He bought it, he paid for it, he died for you to keep it. And you've already erased him. New furniture, new boyfriend, selling his medals like they were yard sale junk. How long until you sell the house too? How long until there's nothing left of my brother except a headstone and 3 kids who don't even know his name? Get out, Patricia said, her voice shaking. Get out and don't come back. Oh, I'll leave, I said. But I'm keeping these medals. They're not yours anymore. You sold them, remember? They're mine now. My brother's memory, my family's heritage. You don't get to profit off his death and then erase him like he never existed. I gathered the medals back into the velvet box. Patricia watched with streaming tears, but she didn't try to stop me. One more thing, I said at the door. That engraving? You said you had it added in January. The shop said February 14th to be exact. Valentine's Day. You had your boyfriend's name engraved on my dead brother's medal on Valentine's Day, 3 months after the funeral. Patricia's face crumpled. So either you're lying about when you got together, or you're even more callous than I thought. Either way, you're done pretending you loved Martin. You're done pretending any of this is normal or okay. Luciano. She reached for me one last time. Don't, I said coldly. Don't ever say my name again. As far as I'm concerned, you're not family anymore. You're just the woman who married my brother and couldn't wait for his body to get cold before replacing him. I left then, the metal box clutched tight in my fist, and I didn't look back. But in my car, sitting in the dark driveway, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, I turned that medal over again, looked at the engraving in the dim light. For Roberto, all my love, Patricia. And underneath that, in smaller letters I'd missed before, another line. November 2023. November, the month Martin died. The engraving had been added in February. The shop confirmed that, but the date on it, the date she'd chosen to commemorate, was November. Why would she put November unless that's when something significant happened? Unless that's when they got together? Unless Martin didn't die in an accident at all? I sat there in the dark, a terrible suspicion growing in my mind like a cancer, and I knew exactly what I had to do next. I had to find out the truth. No matter what it cost, no matter who it destroyed, my brother deserved at least that much. I didn't go home that night. Couldn't face Clara, couldn't face questions, couldn't face the normalcy of my house with its warm lights and dinner smells and my daughter asking about homework. Instead, I drove, through streets I knew by heart, past the fire station where Martin had worked for 17 years, past the cemetery where he was buried, past the elementary school where we'd both gone as kids, where the playground equipment was still the same rusted metal structures from 40 years ago. I ended up at O'Malley's, a dive bar on the east side that Martin and I used to go to after family dinners when we needed to decompress. Dark wood, darker lighting, the smell of beer and fried food, and quiet desperation. The kind of place where nobody asked questions and everybody minded their own business. The bartender, Tommy, recognized me. He'd been working there since before I was old enough to drink legally. Luciano, he said, nodding. Been a while. What can I get you? Whiskey, I said. The good stuff. And keep them coming. He poured a double of Jameson, slid it across the scarred bar top. Rough day. You could say that. He nodded, didn't push, moved down the bar to serve someone else. That was the thing about Tommy. He understood when to talk and when to shut up. I pulled out my phone, stared at the screen. I had 17 missed calls, 10 from Clara, 4 from my mother, 3 from Patricia, a dozen text messages, increasingly frantic. I ignored all of them and opened Google instead. Morneau Street apartment fire November 2023, I typed. Dozens of results came up. News articles, mostly. I scrolled through them, reading headlines I'd avoided for months because it hurt too much to see my brother's name in print, to see the photos of the burned building, to relive that day over and over. Hero firefighter dies, saving 3 children. Martin Reyes, 47, gives life in Moreno Street blaze. Community mourns fallen firefighter. I clicked on the most detailed article from the Tribune dated November 24th, one day after the fire. A veteran firefighter died early Thursday morning while rescuing 3 children from a 4-story apartment building on Moreno Street. Martin Reyes, 47, a 17-year veteran of Station 12, entered the burning structure shortly after 3 a.m. to reach 3 children trapped on the 4th floor. According to Fire Chief Roberto Silva, Reyes successfully evacuated Sofia Mendoza, 7, and twins Bruno and Matias Castillo, 5, from the building before a section of the roof collapsed, trapping Reyes on the 4th floor. By the time crews could reach him, Reyes had sustained critical injuries from smoke inhalation, burns, and blunt force trauma. Martin was a hero in every sense of the word, Silva said at a press conference Thursday afternoon. He knew the risks, but he didn't hesitate. Those 3 children are alive because of his bravery and sacrifice. The fire, which began around 2:47 a.m., is believed to have started in the basement due to faulty electrical wiring. The building, built in 1962, had been cited for several fire safety violations over the past 18 months. According to city records, the landlord Gerard Morrison could not be reached for comment. Reyes is survived by his wife Patricia, his parents, and his brother. A memorial service will be held Monday at Holy Cross Church. I read it 3 times, committing every word to memory. Then I opened a new search. Gerard Morrison, landlord, Moreno Street. More articles appeared. I scanned through them, looking for anything that mentioned fire safety violations, city citations, enforcement actions. There, a piece from the city newspaper dated March 2023, 8 months before the fire. Several apartment buildings in the downtown area have been flagged for fire safety violations following a routine inspection sweep by the fire marshal's office. Property owners have been given 90 days to address deficiencies, including inadequate fire escapes, non-functioning smoke detectors, and outdated electrical systems. Among the buildings cited is 847 Moreno Street, a 4-story structure built in 1962. Owner Gerard Morrison faces fines of up to $15,000 if violations are not corrected by June 15, 2023. June 15th, 5 months before the fire that killed my brother. I grabbed a napkin, borrowed a pen from Tommy, started making notes. March 2023. Missed building. Cited for violations. June 15, 2023. Deadline for corrections. November 23, 2023 minus fire occurs, Martin dies. What happened between June and November? Did Morrison fix the violations? Did the fire department follow up? Who was responsible for enforcement? I pulled up the city's public records database on my phone, searched for 847 Moreno Street. The site was clunky, poorly designed, took forever to load, but eventually a list of documents appeared. Inspection reports, citations, notices of violation, correspondence between the fire marshal's office and Morrison. I downloaded everything I could, my phone's storage filling up with PDFs that might contain the truth about what really happened. My second whiskey arrived. I drank it faster than the first. The initial inspection report from March was damning. Electrical wiring described as severely deteriorated. Fire escapes structurally unsound. Smoke detectors non-functional or absent in 60% of units. Sprinkler system inadequate for building size and occupancy. The inspector had recommended immediate action, classified the building as high risk. But then, in the follow-up report from August, 2 months after the correction deadline, the building was listed as pending review. The violations hadn't been fixed, but they hadn't been enforced either. Morrison had apparently filed an appeal claiming financial hardship, requesting an extension. And the fire marshal's office had granted it. 90 more days. A new deadline of November 1st. I checked the next document, a letter from Morrison's lawyer dated October 28th requesting another extension, claiming the work had been scheduled. But the contractor had canceled, promising completion by January 2024. There was no response on file. No approval or denial of the extension request. And then, on November 23rd, the building burned. 3 children almost died. My brother did die. And 5 days later, the fire chief's report classified it as an accidental fire caused by faulty wiring. Case closed. No investigation into why the wiring hadn't been fixed despite multiple citations. No questions about who dropped the ball on enforcement. No accountability. Just my brother in the ground, and Roberto Silva holding his widow at the funeral. I finished my third whiskey. The bar was getting louder, more crowded. Friday night in full swing. People laughing and flirting and living their lives like the world wasn't fundamentally broken. My phone rang Clara again. I answered this time. "Where are you?" she asked, and her voice was tight with worry. "I've been calling for hours," your mother called. "She's frantic." Patricia called crying, saying you confronted her and Roberto and... "I'm at O'Malley's," I interrupted. Silence then. "Are you drunk?" "Getting there." "Luciano, did you know the building Martin died in had been cited for fire safety violations 8 months before the fire?" "What?" 8 months, Clara. The fire marshal's office, Roberto Silva's office, knew that building was a death trap. They gave the landlord deadlines to fix it. He didn't. They gave him extensions. Multiple extensions. And then it burned and Martin died, and nobody asked why the violations weren't enforced. "Luciano, where are you going with this?" "I'm going to find out who's responsible," I said. "I'm going to find out if my brother died because of incompetence or corruption or both. And then I'm going to make sure everyone knows." "You're scaring me," Clara said softly. "I'm scaring myself. But I can't let this go. Not now that I know. Come home, please. We'll figure this out together, but you need to come home. Soon, I promised. I need some time to think." "I love you," she said. "I love you too." I hung up, ordered another whiskey. Tommy poured it but gave me a look that said this was the last one. The bar door opened. I didn't look up, didn't care who was coming or going. But then someone sat on the stool next to mine, and a familiar voice said, "Thought I might find you here." I turned. It was Danny Chen, one of Martin's colleagues from Station 12. We'd met countless times over the years, barbecues, birthday parties, the occasional pickup basketball game. He was younger than Martin, maybe 35, with an easy smile and a reputation for being one of the best firefighters in the department. He wasn't smiling now. "Danny," I said. "Heard you paid Patricia a visit tonight," he said. "Heard it didn't go well. Word travels fast. Small department, smaller world." He signaled Tommy for a beer. "You want to tell me what the hell you're doing?" "Asking questions." "About what?" "About the fire that killed my brother. About why a building with known safety violations was allowed to keep operating. About why the fire chief's investigation was so quick to call it an accident." Danny's beer arrived. He took a long drink before answering. "You think there was a cover-up?" It wasn't a question. "I think there are things that don't add up," I said carefully. I think Roberto Silva had reasons to close the case quickly and quietly. Because he's dating Patricia. Among other things, Danny turned his beer bottle in circles on the bar, watching the condensation leave wet rings on the wood. I was there that night, he said finally. At the fire, I went very still. Tell me, we got the call at 2:51 a.m., structure fire, Moreno Street, multiple residents trapped. We rolled out, 2 engines, 1 ladder truck, full crew. I was on engine 12 with Martin, Rodriguez, and Captain Patterson. And Roberto? He wasn't on scene initially. He showed up maybe 20 minutes after we arrived. Chiefs don't usually respond to every fire, but this one was big enough, dangerous enough, that he came out. What do you remember about the building? Danny's jaw tightened. It was a nightmare. Old, dry as tinder, and once the fire got going, it went up fast, real fast. By the time we arrived, flames were already coming out of second-floor windows. We could hear screaming from inside, residents who couldn't get out, couldn't make it down the main stairs because the fire had cut off that exit route. What about the fire escapes? What fire escapes? Danny said bitterly. Oh, there were structures attached to the building that were supposed to be fire escapes. But half the bolts were rusted through. The metal was so corroded, it was barely safe to stand on, let alone use for evacuation. We got some people out that way, but it was dicey as hell. The inspection reports said the fire escapes were structurally unsound. The inspection reports were being generous. Those things were death traps. Did you know about the violations before that night? Danny hesitated, drank more beer, finally nodded. Some of us knew, not the details, but we knew the building had issues. There'd been a couple of small fires there over the past year. Nothing major, contained quickly, but enough that we'd talked about it, about how that place was an accident waiting to happen. Did anyone say anything? File a complaint? Push for the violations to be enforced? Martin did, Danny said quietly. I froze. What? About 6 months before he died, he'd been in that building twice for minor calls, a kitchen fire, a smoke alarm malfunction. After the second time, he wrote up a report. Detailed everything he'd seen that concerned him. Old wiring, blocked exits, no working smoke detectors in half the units. He submitted it to the fire marshal's office with a recommendation that the building be inspected immediately and potentially condemned if violations weren't corrected. My heart was pounding. What happened to the report? I don't know. I assume it went through proper channels, but nothing changed. The building stayed open. Morrison kept renting units, and 6 months later it burned. Did Martin follow up? Push harder? Yeah, he talked to Captain Patterson about it a few times. Patterson said he'd escalate it, but Danny shrugged. You know how bureaucracy works, or doesn't work. Where's Patterson now? Retired, moved to Florida last month. He was planning to retire anyway, but after Martin died, he moved up his timeline. Said he couldn't do it anymore. Do you have his contact information? Maybe. Why? Because I want to talk to him. I want to know what he did with Martin's report, who he sent it to, what happened to it. Danny pulled out his phone, scrolled through his contacts. I'll text you his number, but Luciano, listen to me. Be careful with this. Careful how? You're asking questions that some people might not want answered. Roberto Silva is well connected. He's been fire chief for 8 years. He has friends in the mayor's office and the city council. If there was negligence, if someone dropped the ball, there are people who have a vested interest in keeping that quiet. Are you saying I should just let it go? Pretend my brother died for no reason? I'm saying you need to be smart about how you pursue this. And you need to be prepared for what you might find. Because if there was a cover-up, if Roberto buried Martin's report or ignored it or failed to act on it, and then Martin died in the exact building he'd warned about, that's career-ending stuff. That's criminal negligence. People will fight to keep that from coming out. Good, I said. Let them fight. I'm not backing down. Danny studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. Martin was my friend, one of the best men I've ever known. If someone's responsible for his death, if someone's hiding the truth, then I want to know too. Whatever you need, I'm in. Thank you. But promise me something. Promise you won't do anything stupid. Don't confront Roberto alone. Don't go to the press without solid evidence. Build your case, get everything documented, and then go through proper channels. What if proper channels are part of the problem? Then we find other channels, but we do this right, for Martin, because he would have wanted justice, not revenge. I wanted to argue that sometimes justice and revenge were the same thing, but Danny was right. Martin had been methodical, careful, by the book. If I was going to honor his memory, I needed to do this the right way. Even if every instinct I had was screaming for blood. I got home around midnight. The house was dark except for the porch light. Clara had left on for me. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, trying to sober up, trying to figure out what I was going to say. Clara was waiting in the kitchen, wrapped in her bathrobe, a cup of chamomile tea cooling on the table in front of her. "Hey," I said. "Hey." She didn't get up, didn't come to me, just looked at me with tired, worried eyes. "Are you okay to talk, or should I put you to bed?" "I can talk." I sat across from her, and the whole story came pouring out. The medals, the engraving, the confrontation with Patricia and Roberto. The date on the medal that said November 2023, the fire inspection reports, the violations that weren't enforced, Martin's report about the building, all of it. Clara listened without interrupting. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hands. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "For what you're going through, for the position you're in, for all of it. I have to do something, Clara. I can't just let this go." "I know, and I'm not asking you to, but I need you to promise me you'll be careful, that you won't let this consume you, that you won't lose yourself in anger and grief and the need for answers. What if the answers are terrible? What if I find out Roberto really did cover something up? What if Martin died because someone didn't do their job? Then we deal with it," Clara said firmly. "Together we get a lawyer, we go to the authorities, we do whatever needs to be done, but we do it smart. We protect ourselves and our family. We don't let this destroy us the way it's already destroyed. Patricia destroyed herself when she sold those medals. Maybe, or maybe she's drowning, and Roberto is the only thing keeping her afloat. People do desperate things when they're grieving. That doesn't make it right, but it makes it understandable." "You're defending her?" "I'm trying to see the whole picture," Clara said. "Yes, what she did was awful. Yes, the timing is suspicious. Yes, you have every right to be angry. But she also lost her husband. She's alone, she's scared, she's probably not thinking clearly. And if Roberto is manipulating her, if he's using her to cover his own tracks, then she's a victim too. I hadn't thought about it that way, hadn't considered that Patricia might not be the villain in this story, but another casualty. I don't know what to believe anymore," I admitted. "Then find out. Ask questions, gather evidence, build your case, but don't lose your humanity in the process. Don't become someone Martin wouldn't recognize." She was right. She was always right. "I love you," I said. "I love you too. Now come to bed. Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do next. Tonight you need sleep." But sleep didn't come easy. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through possibilities and scenarios, and the terrible suspicion that my brother's death wasn't an accident at all. Saturday morning I called Captain Patterson. He answered on the third ring, his voice gravelly and rough like he'd been smoking cigarettes for 50 years. Which, knowing Patterson, he probably had. "Patterson. Captain, this is Luciano Reyes, Martin's brother." A pause. "Luciano. Hell, I'm sorry about Martin. He was one of the best. How you holding up?" "Not great, to be honest. That's actually why I'm calling. I need to ask you about something." "Shoot." Danny Chen said Martin filed a report about the Moreno Street building about 6 months before the fire. Safety concerns, code violations, that sort of thing. Another pause, longer this time. Yeah, he did." "What happened to that report?" "I sent it up the chain, fire marshal's office, like I was supposed to. To Roberto Silva specifically. I don't remember the exact person, but it would have gone through his office. Yeah. He's the chief, everything goes through him eventually." "Did you follow up? Make sure someone acted on it?" Patterson sighed. "Look, Luciano, I don't know what you're trying to get at here, but I'm trying to get at the truth. My brother flagged that building as dangerous 6 months before it killed him. I want to know if anyone actually did anything about his concerns. The fire marshal's office handles enforcement. That's not our job. We respond to fires. We file reports. They follow up. That's how it works. But did they follow up? Did anyone from Silva's office contact you about Martin's report? Schedule a reinspection? Take any action at all? Not that I'm aware of. So Martin raised red flags. You passed them along, and then nothing. The building stayed open. People kept living there, and eventually it burned down exactly like Martin warned it would. You're simplifying a complex situation. Am I? Because it sounds pretty simple to me. My brother tried to prevent a disaster. Someone ignored him. People almost died. He did die, and now the person who was supposed to act on his report is dating his widow. Silence on the other end of the line. Captain Patterson, I need your help. I need to know what you sent to the fire marshal's office, when you sent it, who you sent it to. I need documentation. I'm retired, Luciano. I don't have access to department files anymore. But you remember Martin coming to you, remember him being worried about that building. Of course I remember, Patterson said, and his voice cracked slightly. Martin was passionate about it. He'd seen those kids living in that building, seen the conditions, and it ate at him. He wanted to do something before someone got hurt. And someone did get hurt, multiple someones. I know. Believe me, I know. You think I don't go over that night in my head? That I don't wonder if I could have done more? Pushed harder? I'm not blaming you, I said, though part of me was. I'm trying to find out who is to blame. I'm trying to get justice for my brother. Be careful, son. Sometimes justice and revenge look a lot alike, and one of them will destroy you. That's what everyone keeps telling me. Because it's true. I've seen good men consumed by anger, by the need to make someone pay. Don't let that be you. Just tell me this, I said. Do you think there was negligence? Do you think someone should be held accountable for what happened? Patterson was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with resignation. Yes, he said. I think the system failed. I think multiple people didn't do their jobs. I think if proper procedures had been followed, that building would have been condemned or brought up to code, and Martin would still be alive. But proving it, getting anyone to admit fault, that's going to be damn near impossible. Why? Because nobody wants to be the one who takes the fall. The fire marshal's office will blame the landlord for not fixing violations. The landlord will blame the city for not enforcing codes. The city will blame budget constraints and understaffing. Everyone will point fingers at everyone else, and in the end, no one will be held responsible. So I should just give up? Accept that my brother died and no one gives a damn? I didn't say that. I'm saying you need to be strategic. You need documentation, witnesses, evidence. You need to build an airtight case before you go public. Because the minute you start making accusations, they'll circle the wagons. They'll bury evidence, discredit witnesses, paint you as a grieving brother who's irrational and unreliable. How do I build that case? FOIA requests. Freedom of Information Act. Request all documents related to the Moreno Street building, inspection reports, correspondence, citations, everything. Request Martin's report and all internal communications about it. Request Roberto Silva's complete investigation file on the fire. Get everything in writing. Will they actually give it to me? They have to, by law. They can redact certain things, claim some documents are privileged, but they have to provide the bulk of it. And once you have those documents, you'll be able to see the timeline, see who knew what and when, see where things fell apart. Okay? Okay, I can do that. And Luciano, one more thing. Yeah? Talk to the parents. The families of those kids Martin saved. They're victims too. If there was negligence, they have standing to file complaints, maybe even sue. You might not be able to take down the system alone, but if you can get other families involved, if you can show a pattern of negligence that put multiple lives at risk, you'll have a lot more leverage. That's a good idea. Thank you, Captain. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get ugly. But if anyone deserves answers, it's you. Martin was one of the good ones. best firefighter I ever worked with, and an even better man. We said goodbye. I sat with my phone in my hand, staring at the notes I'd taken during the conversation. FOIA requests, documentation, timeline, other families, pattern of negligence. I could do this, I could build a case, I could get answers. But first, I needed to talk to the people whose children were alive because my brother was dead. It took 3 days to track down the families. The Mendoza family, Sophia's parents, lived in a small house on the south side. I showed up unannounced on Tuesday afternoon, knowing it was invasive and inappropriate but not caring. I needed to know what they remembered, what they'd been told, whether anyone had followed up with them. Maria Mendoza answered the door with a dish towel in her hands and flour on her apron. She was maybe 35, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and eyes that went wide when she saw me. "Can I help you?" she asked, in accented English. "Mrs. Mendoza, my name is Luciano Reyes. I'm Martin Reyes's brother, the firefighter, who—" "I know who he is," she interrupted, and her eyes filled with tears. "I know, please come in." Her house was small but immaculate, filled with the smell of baking bread and the sound of cartoons playing on a television in another room. Photos covered every wall, family pictures, school photos, a large professional portrait of Sophia in a white dress, smiling with missing front teeth. "Sophia," Maria called. "Come here, Maya." A little girl appeared in the doorway, 7 years old, skinny as a rail, with her mother's dark hair and her father's serious eyes. She was wearing a pink t-shirt with a unicorn on it and jeans with holes in the knees. "Sophia, this is Mr. Reyes. He's the brother of the fireman who saved you." Sophia's eyes got huge. She walked over slowly, looking up at me like I was something magical and terrifying at the same time. "Hi," she said shyly. "Hi, Sophia," I managed, my throat tight. "This child was alive because Martin was dead. I'm glad you're okay." "Me too. My mom says your brother was a hero. She says he's in heaven now because he saved me and the twins." "That's right." "I'm sorry he died," Sophia said with the blunt honesty of children. "It makes me sad." "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." Maria sent Sophia back to the TV and gestured for me to sit at the kitchen table. She poured coffee without asking if I wanted any, set out a plate of still warm bread, and sat across from me with her own cup cradled in both hands. "I think about him every day," she said. "Every time I look at Sophia, every time she laughs or complains about homework or asks for dessert, I think about the man who made all of that possible, who gave his life so she could have hers." "Tell me about that night," I said. "What do you remember?" Maria's hands trembled slightly as she sipped her coffee. "We were asleep, all of us. Sophia in her room, me and my husband in ours. It was maybe 3 in the morning when the smoke detector went off. Except it wasn't our smoke detector. It was the neighbor's. We didn't have one that worked. The landlord was supposed to install new ones, but he never did." "How long had yours been broken?" "Months, maybe 6 months. I complained 3 times. He said he would fix it, but he never came." "What happened when you woke up?" "The hallway was full of smoke. Black smoke, so thick I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. The lights were out. The fire must have damaged the electrical system. My husband tried to go towards Sophia's room, but the smoke was too much. He couldn't breathe. He came back. And we didn't know what to do. We couldn't get to our daughter, couldn't see, couldn't breathe." She was crying now, reliving the nightmare. "Then we heard voices, men shouting, firefighters. They came through the window. We were on the 4th floor, and they came up the fire escape, even though it was shaking and making terrible noises like it might collapse. One of them was your brother. He had Sophia. She was unconscious, not breathing right, and he had her in his arms." "Did he say anything to you?" "He said, 'I've got her. I've got your baby. Get out, go down the fire escape. I'll be right behind you.' And we did. We trusted him. We climbed down that rickety fire escape while the building burned around us, and when we got to the ground, there were paramedics waiting. They took Sophia, put oxygen on her, and she started breathing better. And I looked up at the building, looked for your brother, but the roof had already collapsed." Maria nodded, wiping at her tears with the dish towel. "They told us later that he'd gone back in for the twins, that he got them out too, but then the roof came down and trapped him, that by the time they could reach him, it was too late. Did anyone from the fire department follow up with you afterward? Ask questions about the building? About the safety violations? A man came, maybe a week after the fire. He asked about the smoke detector, about the fire escape, about what we'd seen. I told him everything. I told him everything. I told him the landlord never fixed anything, that we'd complained many times, that the building was dangerous. He wrote it all down and said someone would be in touch. What was his name? I don't remember. He had a uniform, brass buttons. He was tall, with gray hair. Roberto Silva. Of course it was. Did anyone ever contact you again? Follow up on your statement? No. The landlord's insurance company sent us some money, $2,000 for our belongings that burned. We had to sign papers saying we wouldn't sue. My husband wanted to refuse, wanted to fight, but we needed the money. We'd lost everything. $2,000, I repeated. For all your belongings, for your daughter's life. It's more than we had. We're not citizens, Mr. Reyes. We can't afford lawyers, can't fight the system. We took what we could get and tried to move on. What if you could fight? What if you had help? Maria looked at me with hope and fear warring in her eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying I think my brother died because people didn't do their jobs. I think that building should have been condemned or fixed, and if it had been, the fire never would have happened. Martin would still be alive, and I think the people responsible should be held accountable. But how? We have no money for lawyers. You might not need money. If there's evidence of negligence, if I can prove the fire department knew about the violations and didn't enforce them, there are lawyers who will take the case on contingency, meaning they only get paid if you win. And you think we could win? I think we deserve to try. I think my brother deserves justice, and I think your family and the Castillo family deserve more than $2,000 and a pat on the head. Maria was quiet for a long time, looking at her hands, at the coffee going cold in her cup. My husband will be afraid, she said finally, afraid of deportation, of retaliation, of making things worse. I understand, and I'm not asking you to decide right now. I'm just asking you to think about it, to consider that maybe the system that failed to protect you should face consequences. What would we have to do? Talk to a lawyer, give statements about the conditions in the building, about what you told the fire chief, about what you were promised and what actually happened. Let them investigate on your behalf. Will you be there? Will you help us? Every step of the way, I promised. She nodded slowly. Okay, I'll talk to my husband. We'll think about it. Thank you, Mrs. Mendoza. As I stood to leave, Sophia appeared in the doorway again. Mr. Reyes, she said in her small voice. Yes, sweetheart? Can you tell your brother thank you? If he's in heaven, can you tell him I said thank you for saving me? I knelt down so I was at her eye level, looked at this child who was alive, breathing, whole. I'll tell him, I said, my voice thick. And he'd want you to know that you were worth it, that your life mattered, that he'd do it again. She hugged me then, this little girl who my brother died for, and I held her and let myself cry for the first time since the funeral. The Castillo family was harder to find. They'd moved after the fire, left the city entirely, and it took me 4 days and a dozen phone calls to track them down to a small town 2 hours north. I drove up on Saturday, telling Clara I needed to do this, needed to hear their story. She understood. She always understood. The Castillos lived in a trailer park on the edge of town, a collection of mobile homes that had seen better days. I found their address, Lot 47, and parked in front of a faded blue trailer with a small yard where 2 identical boys were kicking a soccer ball back and forth. 5 years old, Bruno and Matthias. The twins Martin had died saving. I sat in my car for 5 minutes watching them play. They were laughing, arguing over who scored a goal, tackling each other into the grass, alive, loud, normal. Because of Martin, their father, Carlos Castillo, came out when he saw me sitting there. He was young, maybe 28, with the muscular build of someone who worked with his hands, and the wary eyes of someone who'd learned not to trust easily. Can I help you? He called from the porch. I got out of my car. Mr. Castillo. My name is Luciana Reyes. I know who you are, he interrupted, and his face went pale. You're his brother, the firefighter who died. Martin, yes. Carlos was quiet for a moment, then called to the boys. Bruno, Matthias, inside, now. But Dad? Now, the twins ran inside, casting curious glances at me as they went. Carlos waited until the door closed behind them before walking down from the porch. You shouldn't be here, he said. I need to talk to you about the fire, about what happened. There's nothing to talk about. It's done. It's over. Is it? Because my brother is dead, and I'm trying to figure out if his death could have been prevented. Of course, it could have been prevented, Carlos said, and there was anger in his voice now. If that bastard Morrison had fixed the building like he was supposed to, if the fire department had shut it down when they knew it was dangerous, if any of the people who were supposed to protect us had actually done their jobs, there wouldn't have been a fire at all. You know about the violations? Everyone who lived there knew. We complained all the time. No smoke detectors. No sprinklers. The fire escapes were falling apart. The wiring was so old it sparked sometimes when you plugged things in. We all knew it was a death trap. But where else were we supposed to go? You know what rent is in this city? We couldn't afford anything better. Did anyone from the fire department talk to you after the fire? Carlos laughed bitterly. Oh yeah, the fire chief himself, real sympathetic, asked all kinds of questions about what we saw, what we knew about the building, promised a thorough investigation, said people would be held accountable. And nothing. Never heard from him again. Just got a check from the landlord's insurance, $3,000 in papers to sign saying we wouldn't sue. My wife wanted to fight it, wanted justice, but the lawyer we talked to said it would cost more than we'd ever win. Said these cases drag on for years, that the city would bury us in paperwork and legal fees. So we took the money and left. What if I told you there might be another way? That if we can prove negligence, prove that people knew about the violations and didn't act, we might be able to hold them accountable. Carlos studied me. Why? Why do you care? Your brother's gone. This won't bring him back. No, but it might mean his death wasn't completely meaningless. It might save the next person who'd die in a building everyone knows is dangerous but nobody bothers to fix. You really think you can win against the city, the fire department, all of them? I don't know, but I think we have to try. Carlos looked back at his trailer, at the window where I could see two small faces pressed against the glass, watching us. Those boys, he said quietly. They don't remember much about that night. Bruno has nightmares sometimes. Wakes up screaming about smoke and fire. Matthias won't go near candles, won't even let us light the stove if he can see it. They know a man died saving them. They know they're alive because of him. That's a heavy thing for a 5-year-old to carry. I'm sorry. Don't be, we're grateful. Every single day we're grateful. But it's complicated, you know? How do you explain to your kids that they're alive because someone else isn't? How do you teach them the value of life when the cost was so high? You teach them not to waste it, I said. You teach them that Martin's sacrifice meant something, that they matter, that their lives are worth living fully and joyfully. Carlos nodded slowly. My wife talks about him sometimes, about your brother. She says he smiled when he handed her the twins. Even with the building burning around them, even knowing he was going back in, he smiled and said, they're okay. Your boys are okay. Those were the last words she heard from him. My throat was too tight to speak. So yeah, Carlos continued. If you want to fight this, if you want to hold people accountable, we're in, not for the money. Though God knows we could use it. But because your brother deserves better than to be forgotten. Deserves better than to die for nothing. Thank you, I managed. No, Carlos said. Thank you. And thank your brother, even though he can't hear it. Thank him for our boys, for their future, for everything. I drove home with 2 families committed to joining the fight. 2 families ready to demand answers, to seek justice, to make sure Martin's death meant something. It was a start. But I knew the real battle was just beginning. That night, I sat down at my computer and started drafting FOIA requests. Page after page of formal language, requesting all inspection reports for 847 Moreno Street from January 2020 to November 2023, all correspondence between the fire marshal's office and the property owner, all internal communications regarding safety violations at the property. Martin Reyes' report dated May 2023 regarding safety concerns. Roberto Silva's complete investigation file on the November 23, 2023 fire. All communications between Roberto Silva and Patricia Reyes from November 2023 to present. That last one was a shot in the dark. They'd almost certainly deny it, claim privacy protections or irrelevance. But I wanted it on record that wanted them to know I was looking at every angle. Clara read over my shoulder as I typed. This is really happening, she said. Yeah, you're going to war with the fire department, with the city, with people who have money and lawyers and power. I know. And you're absolutely sure this is what you want to do. I turned to look at her, my wife of 15 years, the mother of my child, the woman who'd stood by me through everything. Martin tried to prevent this, I said. He filed a report. He raised concerns. He did everything right, and someone ignored him. Someone decided their job security or their budget or their career was more important than safety. And then when the inevitable happened, when the building burned just like he warned it would, that same someone swept it under the rug and called it an accident. No, I'm not sure this is what I want to do, but I'm sure it's what I have to do. Clara kissed my forehead. Then let's do it right. Let's get you a lawyer. The lawyer came recommended by a colleague of Clara's, a friend of a friend who specialized in wrongful death and municipal negligence cases. His name was David Park, and he agreed to meet with me on short notice after Clara explained the basics of the situation. His office was downtown on the 14th floor of a glass building that screamed expensive. I felt underdressed in my jeans and button-down, but David greeted me warmly, shook my hand with a firm grip, and gestured me toward a chair in front of his massive mahogany desk. He was maybe 40, Asian American, with sharp eyes and an air of competence that immediately put me at ease. Mr. Reyes, he said, I'm very sorry for your loss. Your brother sounds like he was a remarkable man. He was. Now, I've heard the basics from Mrs. Park, but why don't you walk me through everything from the beginning? Don't leave anything out. Even details that seem insignificant might matter. So I told him everything. The fire, the funeral, Patricia and Roberto, the medals, the engraving, the inspection reports, the violations that weren't enforced, Martin's report that disappeared into a bureaucratic void, the families who'd been paid off to stay quiet. All of it. David took notes on a yellow legal pad, filling page after page with his neat handwriting. When I finished, he sat back and tapped his pen against his teeth, thinking, Okay, he said finally, let's talk about what we have and what we need. What we have is evidence of known safety violations, evidence that your brother filed a report about those violations, and evidence that the fire department failed to adequately enforce corrections. We also have two families willing to testify that they complained about conditions and were ignored. That's good. That's a foundation. And what do we need? We need to establish a direct chain of responsibility. We need to show that specific individuals, not just the department as an entity, but actual people with names and titles, knew about the danger and chose not to act. We need to show that their inaction directly led to the fire and your brother's death. And ideally, we need some kind of documentation showing consciousness of guilt, proof that they knew they'd screwed up and tried to cover it. Like Roberto Silva's relationship with Patricia? Maybe. That's circumstantial, but it does raise questions about his objectivity in investigating the fire. A defense attorney would argue it's irrelevant, that his personal life doesn't affect the validity of his professional findings, but it creates an optics problem. It makes people wonder, and in a case like this, where we're arguing systematic failure and possible cover-up, optics matter. So what's our next move? First, we wait for the FOIA responses. Once we have those documents, we can analyze them, build our timeline, identify the key players. Second, I'll file a preservation notice with the city and the fire department, requiring them to retain all relevant documents and communications. That prevents them from accidentally losing evidence. Third, we start deposing witnesses, the fire marshal, the building inspectors, anyone who had knowledge of the violations. We build our case piece by piece. How long does this take? Months, probably over a year before we'd see the inside of a courtroom. These cases move slowly, especially against municipal defendants. They have government attorneys, unlimited resources, and every incentive to drag things out until you give up or run out of money. I'm not giving up. I believe you, but I need you to understand what you're getting into. This will be expensive, exhausting, and emotionally draining. They'll depose you, your family, your mother, anyone who knew Martin. They'll dig into Patricia's life, your brother's life, looking for anything they can use to muddy the waters. They'll argue Martin knew the risks, that he chose to enter that building, that his death was a tragic but inevitable consequence of being a firefighter. That's bullshit. Of course it is, but it's their argument, and my job is to make sure the jury sees through it. What are our chances? David was quiet for a moment. Honestly, maybe 50-50. These cases are hard. Juries are sympathetic to firefighters, but they're also inclined to believe that accidents happen, that not every tragedy is someone's fault. We'll need to be very clear, very compelling, very convincing that this wasn't just bad luck. It was negligence. And if we lose, then you'll owe court costs and fees, and the people responsible will walk away without consequences. And if we win, then we get financial compensation for the families, we get public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and we get policy changes that prevent this from happening to someone else. We might not get criminal charges, that's up to the DA, but we can make it hurt enough that people think twice before cutting corners on safety. I thought about Martin's medal with Roberto's name on it, about Patricia crying in her living room, about Sofia Mendoza hugging me and thanking me for a brother she'd never met, about the twins kicking a soccer ball in their yard, alive because Martin gave everything. Let's do it, I said. Whatever it takes, let's do it. David extended his hand. Then let's get to work. The FOIA responses started trickling in 3 weeks later. Some came quickly, public records that couldn't be withheld, like inspection reports and building permits. Others came with heavy redactions, black bars covering names and details, forcing us to guess at what they were hiding. And some didn't come at all, with the city claiming exemptions for ongoing investigations or attorney-client privilege. But what we did get was damning. David and I spread the documents across his conference room table, building a chronology of failure. March 15, 2023. Initial inspection of 847 Moreno Street. Inspector notes numerous critical violations, including faulty wiring, inadequate fire suppression systems, and unsafe fire escapes. Classifies building as high risk. Gives owner 90 days to correct. April 3, 2023. Follow-up notice sent to landlord Jared Morrison, reiterating deadline of June 15, 2023. May 12, 2023. Martin Reyes submits detailed report to Fire Marshal's office outlining safety concerns at 847 Moreno Street, recommends immediate reinspection and potential emergency closure if violations not addressed. May 18, 2023. Internal memo from Fire Marshal Davis to Chief Silva, Reyes. Report Romero St. Building, recommend follow-up inspection ASAP. Building poses imminent danger. June 15, 2023, deadline passes. No reinspection conducted. July 1, 2023, Morrison's attorney files appeal requesting extension due to financial hardship. No opposition filed by Fire Marshal's office. July 15, 2023, extension granted. New deadline November 1, 2023. September 22, 2023. Minor fire at 847 Moreno Street contained to single unit, Station 12 responds. Incident report notes ongoing safety concerns. October 28, 2023. Morrison requests second extension, claims contractor delays. November 1st, 2023. Second deadline passes. No documented response from Fire Marshal's office. November 23, 2023. Building burns. Martin dies. November 28, 2023. Roberto Silva closes investigation. Cause accidental fire due to faulty wiring. Determination, no negligence, no criminal liability. Look at this, David said, pointing to the May 18th memo. Fire Marshal Davis recommended immediate follow-up on Martin's report. He used the words imminent danger. That's not casual bureaucratic language. That's drop everything and deal with this language. So what happened? Why didn't they follow up? That's the million-dollar question. David shuffled through more papers. Here, look at this email chain from late May. He showed me a series of heavily redacted emails between Davis and Silva. Most of the content was blacked out, but a few lines remained visible. Budget constraints make additional inspections difficult. Morrison has political connections. Recommend prioritizing other properties. Political connections, I said. Morrison had pull somewhere. It looks that way. And someone decided that a landlord's political relationships were more important than tenant safety. Who? Who made that decision? That's what we need to find out. And that's where the depositions come in. David filed the lawsuit on December 18, 2024. Defendants, the city, the fire department, Fire Chief Roberto Silva, Fire Marshal Jonathan Davis, and landlord Gerard Morrison. Plaintiffs, the estates of Martin Reyes, Sofia Mendoza's family, and the Castillo family. Cause of action, wrongful death due to negligence, failure to enforce safety codes, and gross dereliction of duty. The news hit the papers the next day. Family of fallen firefighter sues city over fatal blaze. My phone exploded. Calls from reporters, from former colleagues, from distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Clara fielded most of them, protecting me from the barrage. But some calls I had to take. My mother called crying. Not sad crying. Angry crying. How could you? She demanded. How could you do this without telling me? I'm Martin's mother. I had a right to know. Mom, I'm sorry. I wanted to wait until we had everything ready. I don't want apologies. I want answers. Why are you dragging our family through this? Why can't you just let Martin rest in peace? Because his death wasn't peaceful. It was preventable. People screwed up and he died, and they're getting away with it. And suing them brings him back? Makes it better? No. But maybe it stops the next person from dying the same way. She hung up on me. Dad called an hour later. Your mother is upset, he said, in his gruff, matter-of-fact way. I know. She'll get over it. She's scared. Scared of losing you too. Of this consuming you, of our family being torn apart even more than it already is. I have to do this, Dad. I know you do. And for what it's worth, I think Martin would be proud. He never could let injustice stand. Neither can you, apparently. It runs in the family. You're not mad? I'm furious, but not at you. At them. At every person who saw the danger and looked the other way. At a system that values money and connections over lives. So yeah, sue the bastards. Make them pay. And if you need anything, money, support, someone to testify, you call me. Thanks, Dad. Don't thank me. Just win. Patricia called at 2 in the morning. I was asleep, dreaming about Martin, about the funeral, about medals with names engraved on them. The phone ringing pulled me out of the dream and into the dark reality of my bedroom. I checked the caller ID, almost didn't answer. But curiosity, or maybe masochism, won out. Hello? You're destroying me. Her voice was thick with tears and something else. Alcohol, maybe. You're destroying my life, and you don't even care. Patricia, Roberto lost his job. They put him on administrative leave. Pending the investigation, they said. As if he did something wrong. As if he's the villain here. He might be. He saved people. He spent his entire career saving people. And now because of you, because of your vendetta, his reputation is ruined. We're ruined. My vendetta? Patricia, my brother is dead. Dead because people didn't do their jobs. Because safety violations were ignored. Because someone decided enforcing codes was too hard or too expensive or too politically inconvenient. It was an accident. The investigation said it was an accident. An investigation Roberto conducted. The same Roberto who's now sleeping in my brother's bed. The same Roberto who had every reason to close the case quickly and quietly and move on with his life. With you. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Then explain the timeline, Patricia. Explain how you went from grieving widow to dating the fire chief in 3 months. Explain why you sold Martin's medals with Roberto's name engraved on them. Explain any of this in a way that makes sense. I loved Martin. Did you? Because I'm starting to wonder. I'm starting to think maybe you loved the idea of Martin, the hero firefighter husband. But the reality, the long shifts, the worry, the nights alone, maybe that wasn't so appealing. Maybe when Roberto came along, offering stability and understanding and a shoulder to cry on, you jumped at the chance to replace the husband who'd had the audacity to die. She was crying hard now. Ugly sobs that made her words almost unintelligible. That's not fair. That's not. You don't know what it was like. Being married to someone who chose strangers over his own family every single time. Who ran into burning buildings while I sat at home wondering if he'd come back. Who died saving someone else's kids while we. She trailed off. While you what? I asked quietly. Nothing. No, say it. While you what? While we were trying to have a baby, she whispered. We'd been trying for 2 years, IVF, treatments, everything. We just found out I was pregnant. 6 weeks. I was 6 weeks pregnant when he died. The world tilted. What? I miscarried 2 weeks after the funeral. The stress, the grief, the doctor said my body just couldn't. And I lost him and the baby both. Lost everything in the space of a month. So don't you dare tell me I didn't love my husband. Don't you dare judge how I grieved or how I survived. I sat in my dark bedroom, phone pressed to my ear, processing this information I didn't want, this complication that made everything harder. I didn't know, I said. I didn't tell anyone, only Monica knew. And Roberto, he was there when I lost the baby. Drove me to the hospital at 3 in the morning. When I started bleeding, held my hand while the doctors confirmed there was no heartbeat. He was there, Luciano. Where were you? I would have been there if you'd told me. Would you, or would you have been too busy being angry at me for moving on too fast? For not mourning the right way, for not fitting into your perfect picture of the grieving widow? I had no answer for that. Roberto's a good man, Patricia continued. He made mistakes, maybe. Everyone makes mistakes. But he doesn't deserve this, doesn't deserve to lose his career. His reputation, everything he's worked for, because you need someone to blame for Martin's death. This isn't about blame, it's about accountability. It's the same thing. No, it's not. Blame is emotional. Accountability is structural. I don't care if Roberto feels bad about what happened. I care that the system failed, and nobody's doing anything to fix it so it doesn't fail again. By destroying us? That's your solution? By demanding transparency. By insisting that when people know about dangerous conditions and don't act, there are consequences. If Roberto's clean, if he did everything by the book, then he has nothing to worry about. Patricia laughed bitterly. You really believe that? You think truth matters? That doing the right thing protects you? Martin did the right thing. He filed that report. He raised concerns. And all it got him was a grave. Which is exactly why we can't let it go. His death has to mean something. It means 3 children are alive. Isn't that enough? No, I said simply. It's not. We sat in silence for a long moment. 2 people who used to be family now on opposite sides of a war neither of us wanted. I'm sorry about the baby, I said finally. I really am. I can't imagine how hard that must have been. Thank you. But I'm not dropping the lawsuit. I can't. Too many people are depending on answers. Too many lives were affected. I know, she said quietly. I didn't call to change your mind. I called because I needed you to know. Needed you to understand that there's more to this than you think. That people are complicated. That grief makes us do things that don't make sense to anyone else. I get that. I do. But Patricia, I need you to understand something too. If Roberto was negligent, if he ignored warnings or failed to enforce codes or covered up his own mistakes, I will expose that. I will burn down his career without hesitation or remorse. Because my brother's life was worth more than anyone's job security. I know, she said again, that's what scares me. You're so certain you're right, so sure you know the truth. But what if you're wrong? What if you destroy people for nothing? Then I'll have to live with that. just like Roberto has to live with the consequences of his decisions, just like you have to live with selling those medals. She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in the dark for a long time after that, thinking about babies that never got to be born, about widows who grieved in ways that looked wrong to everyone else, about fire chiefs who maybe made mistakes but didn't deserve to be villains. But then I thought about Martin's face in that hospital bed, about Sofia Mendoza's hug, about the Castillo twins playing soccer in their yard, about justice, and I knew I couldn't stop, wouldn't stop. Not until everyone knew the truth. The depositions started in January. First up, Fire Marshal Jonathan Davis. David and I sat across from him in a windowless conference room, two city attorneys flanking him like bodyguards. Davis was in his mid-50s, balding with the deflated look of a man who knew his career was over regardless of what happened next. David went through the preliminaries: name, title, years of service. Then he got to the meat of it. Mr. Davis, I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 7. This is an internal memo dated May 18, 2023, from you to Fire Chief Silva. Can you read the highlighted portion for the record? Davis put on reading glasses. Reyes report Remarried Saint Building. Recommend follow-up inspection ASAP. Building poses imminent danger. You used the phrase imminent danger, correct? Yes. What does that phrase mean to you in your professional capacity? It means there's a clear and present risk of harm, that conditions exist which could lead to injury or death in the near term. And when you make a recommendation for ASAP action on a building posing imminent danger, what's the typical timeline for response? Ideally within 24 to 48 hours, 72 hours at most. And in this case, how long was it before a follow-up inspection occurred? Davis looked down at his hands. There was no follow-up inspection. None at all? No. Why not? I don't know. You don't know. You made a recommendation using the phrase imminent danger and then you just forgot about it. I didn't forget. I followed up with Chief Silva multiple times. I asked about the status, pushed for action, but he said there were resource constraints that we had to prioritize, that Morrison was working with the city council to get more time. Morrison, the landlord? Yes. He was working with the city council? Do you know which council members? Davis shifted uncomfortably. I don't have specific names, but you're aware that he had political connections? I was told he did. Yes. Who told you that? Chief Silva. And did Chief Silva indicate that these political connections were influencing the department's enforcement decisions? One of the city attorneys jumped in. Objection. Calls for speculation. I'm asking what he was told, David countered. That's not speculation, that's fact. The attorney nodded reluctantly. Davis sighed. Chief Silva said we needed to be careful, that Morrison knew people, that there could be blowback if we pushed too hard. He said it was better to work with him, give him time to comply, rather than come down with a heavy hand and create problems. Problems for whom? For the department, for our funding, for our relationships with the council. So to be clear, you're testifying that political considerations influenced the decision not to enforce safety codes at a building your own memo described as posing imminent danger. I'm saying that was part of the calculation, yes. And then that building burned, and a firefighter died. Martin Reyes died. Yes, Davis whispered. Did you ever tell Chief Silva that his decision to delay enforcement was wrong, that it put lives at risk? I expressed concerns. Yes. Did you threaten to resign? To go public? To escalate the issue above Silva's head? No. Why not? Because Davis took off his glasses, rubbed his eyes. Because I was 2 years from retirement. Because I have a mortgage and a daughter in college. Because I convinced myself that Morrison would eventually fix the violations, that we'd get lucky, that nothing bad would happen. But you were wrong. Yes, I was wrong, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. David, let that sit for a moment. Then, did you attend Martin Reyes' funeral? Yes. Did you say anything to his widow, to his family? I offered my condolences, said he was a hero. Did you tell them that he'd filed a report about that exact building 6 months before he died in it? No. Did you tell them that his warnings were ignored? No. Why not? Because I was told not to. By whom? Chief Silva. He said the investigation was ongoing, that we couldn't discuss specifics, that it was important to control the narrative. Control the narrative, David repeated, meaning make sure nobody knew the fire department had screwed up. Objection, the city attorney barked. Withdrawn, David said smoothly. Mr. Davis, one last question. If you could go back to May 2023, knowing what you know now, would you do anything differently? Davis looked at me for the first time since the deposition started, really looked at me, and I saw the guilt and regret and self-loathing in his eyes. I'd quit my job before I'd let that building stay open, he said. I'd go to the press, to the mayor, to anyone who'd listen. I'd make so much noise they'd have no choice but to shut it down. And Martin Reyes would still be alive. Roberto Silva's deposition was scheduled for February 14th, Valentine's Day, the same day Patricia had the engraving added to Martin's medal. I didn't think the scheduling was coincidental. The city attorneys tried to block it, claiming Roberto was too emotionally fragile, that he was under doctor's care for stress and anxiety, that forcing him to testify would be cruel. David filed a motion arguing that if Roberto was too fragile to answer questions, he was too fragile to serve as fire chief, and perhaps the city should confirm his termination immediately. The judge sided with us. Deposition would proceed as scheduled. Roberto showed up in a suit, not his uniform. He'd lost weight, I noticed. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollowed out. Patricia sat in the waiting area outside, which was allowed but not required. David and I exchanged a look. She was there for moral support, or maybe to keep him on message. The deposition started with Roberto's credentials: 30 years in the fire service, 8 as chief, dozens of commendations. A spotless record. Then David hit him with the first real question. Chief Silva, were you aware that firefighter Martin Reyes had submitted a report in May 2023 expressing safety concerns about 847 Moreno Street? I was made aware, yes. Who made you aware? Fire Marshal Davis forwarded the report to me with his recommendation for follow-up. And what action did you take? I reviewed the report. I consulted with the city attorney's office about our enforcement options. I determined that the most prudent course was to work with the property owner to bring the building into compliance, rather than pursue punitive measures immediately. Why? Because punitive enforcement, issuing citations, imposing fines, or closing the building would have displaced dozens of families. We would have been creating a homeless crisis. I felt it was more responsible to give the owner time to make corrections while residents remained housed. Even though your own fire marshal said the building posed imminent danger, I weighed multiple factors. Imminent danger is serious, but it's not the only consideration. There are economic factors, social factors, practical factors, like political factors. Roberto's jaw tightened. I don't know what you mean. Fire Marshal Davis testified that you told him Gerard Morrison had political connections, that those connections influenced your enforcement decisions. Davis misunderstood. Did he? Or did you tell him explicitly that pushing too hard on Morrison could create problems for the department's funding and relationships with the city council? I may have noted that Morrison was known to council members. That's just a fact. A fact that caused you to delay enforcement on a building your own staff had flagged as dangerous. I didn't delay enforcement. I pursued a collaborative approach. A collaborative approach that resulted in no inspection, no enforcement, and ultimately a fire that killed one of your own men. Objection, the city attorney said. Argumentative. Sustained, the court reporter said dutifully. David pivoted. Let's talk about your investigation after the fire. You personally took charge of determining the cause and assigning responsibility, correct? That's standard procedure for fatal fires. Even when you had prior knowledge of the building's violations, when your own department had failed to enforce corrections, doesn't that create a conflict of interest? I conducted a thorough, objective investigation. Did you include in your report the fact that Martin Reyes had warned about this specific building 6 months earlier? That wasn't relevant to determining the cause of the fire. Wasn't relevant? The fire was caused by faulty wiring. Your own report says so. Martin's report from May specifically identified faulty wiring as a critical safety violation. How is that not relevant? The cause of the fire and the broader context of building safety are separate issues. Convenient separation. Tell me, Chief Silva, when did you first meet Patricia Reyes? The city attorney shot to his feet. Objection. The chief's personal life is not relevant to this proceeding. It's absolutely relevant, David countered. The witness conducted an investigation into the death of Martin Reyes, then began a romantic relationship with the victim's widow months later. That raises serious questions about his objectivity and motivations. The attorney looked at Roberto, who'd gone very pale. I met Mrs. Reyes at her husband's funeral, Roberto said carefully. I presented her with the flag and offered my condolences. When did the relationship become romantic? I don't see how that's... Answer the question, Chief. We became close in January. She was struggling, grieving. I offered support. Support, is that what you call it, Chief Silva? I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 23. This is a receipt from a jeweler, dated February 14th, 2024. It shows payment for an engraving service. Do you recognize this receipt? Roberto studied it. No. That's interesting, because the credit card used to pay for it is in your name, and the engraving was added to a medal that belonged to Martin Reyes. A medal that was in Patricia Reyes's possession. Can you explain that? Patricia asked me to take care of the engraving. I don't recall the specific details. You don't recall paying to have your name engraved on a dead firefighter's medal on Valentine's Day, less than 3 months after his death? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Help me understand how this is appropriate behavior for the man investigating that firefighter's death. I wasn't investigating anything by February. The case was closed. Closed quickly, closed quietly. Closed in a way that absolved you and your department of any responsibility. And then, conveniently, you began dating the widow. You moved into her home. You erased Martin Reyes from his own life and stepped into his place. That's a disgusting characterization. Is it, or is it accurate? Chief Silva, did you fail to enforce safety codes at 847 Moreno Street because of political pressure? No. Did you conduct a rushed investigation to avoid scrutiny of your department's failures? No. Did you pursue a relationship with Patricia Reyes to ensure she wouldn't ask difficult questions about her husband's death? Absolutely not. I cared about her. I care about her. But you didn't care enough about Martin Reyes to follow up on his safety report. Didn't care enough to enforce the codes that might have saved his life. You only started caring about his widow after he was conveniently dead and she was vulnerable and alone. Roberto stood up. I'm done with this. Sit down, Chief. We're not finished. I said I'm done. You can subpoena me for trial if you want, but I'm not sitting here and listening to you twist everything into some conspiracy theory. He walked out. The city attorneys scrambled to follow. Patricia stood when she saw him, her face full of concern. David and I sat in the empty conference room. Well, David said, that went better than expected. How do you figure? He cracked, lost his composure. On the record, juries love that. Shows he's got something to hide. We still don't have proof he deliberately covered up the failures. Not yet, but we've got enough to keep digging. And every time they try to hide something, they make our case stronger. I looked at the stack of depositions, documents, exhibits, evidence of failure and loss and broken systems. We're going to trial, aren't we? Yeah, David said. We're going to trial. The trial was set for September 9th, 2025, nearly 2 years after Martin died. 2 years of depositions and document requests and motions and counter-motions. 2 years of watching David dissect the fire department's failures piece by piece. 2 years of my marriage straining under the weight of obsession, of Emma asking why Daddy was always angry, of my mother refusing to speak to me because I wouldn't let Martin rest. 2 years of Patricia and Roberto's engagement announcement in the paper, of seeing them at the grocery store, at restaurants, living the life that should have been Martin's, of biting my tongue and collecting evidence instead of screaming. But 3 weeks before trial, everything changed. David called me on a Tuesday evening, August 19th. His voice was tight with excitement. We got something. Meet me at the office. Now. I drove downtown, my heart hammering. Clara didn't ask questions, just kissed me and said, "Be careful." David was waiting in his conference room. Documents spread across the table like a war room. His paralegal, Jennifer, was there too, along with an older man I didn't recognize. "Luciano, this is Frank Morrison," David said. "Gerard Morrison's brother." I stared. "The landlord's brother?" "Former brother," Frank corrected. His voice was rough, bitter. "Haven't spoken to that bastard in 2 years. Not since the fire." "Why are you here?" Frank pulled out a banker's box, set it on the table with a heavy thud. "Because Gerard's dying. Liver cancer. 6 months, maybe less. And before he goes, I want everyone to know what kind of man he really was. What he did." David opened the box. Inside were files, ledgers, correspondence, years of documents. "Frank came to me this afternoon," David explained. "He's been holding on to these since Gerard's business went bankrupt last year. He thought about destroying them, but his conscience wouldn't let him." "What's in them?" I asked. Frank's jaw worked. Proof that Gerard bribed city officials to delay enforcement. Proof that he knew the building was a death trap and didn't care. Proof that people died because my brother valued money over human lives. He pulled out a folder, opened it to show a ledger with entries in neat handwriting. Gerard kept records of everything, every payoff, every favor, every deal. He was paranoid about getting screwed, so he documented it all. Insurance, he called it. I looked at the ledger, line after line of payments. City Council member J. Torres, $5,000, March 2023. Fire Marshal Office, Rar Silva, $3,000, June 2023. Building Inspector Mess, Chen, $2,000, July 2023. My blood went cold. Silva. Roberto Silva. Your fire chief, Frank confirmed. $3,000, paid in cash, handed over in an envelope at Ricardo's restaurant on June 28, 2023. Gerard wrote it all down. Date, time, location, amount. "This is it," David breathed. "This is what we needed. Direct evidence of corruption. Silva took a bribe to delay enforcement." "There's more," Frank said, pulling out another file. Emails between Gerard and Silva, planning their meetings, discussing the timeline for compliance, Gerard asking for extensions, and Silva promising to take care of it. All from Silva's personal email, not his official fire department account. I read through the emails, my hands shaking, from r.silva1975@gmail.com to gmorrison@morrisonproperties.com. Date June 15th, 2023. Subject Remarried Street. Gerard, I've pushed the deadline back to November 1st. That should give you enough time to secure financing and schedule the work. In the meantime, I'll keep Davis off your back. Just remember our agreement. B.A. Rao. Our agreement, I said. The bribe. Gets better, Frank said, and pulled out a check. A personal check from Gerard Morrison to Roberto Silva, dated July 10th, 2023, for $3,000. Memo line, consulting services. He wrote a check? David said incredulously. After paying cash? Why? Because Gerard got paranoid, Frank explained. Thought maybe Silva would turn on him, claim he never got paid. So he wrote a check a few weeks later. Made it look legitimate. Business consulting. Silva deposited it in his personal account. David was already on his phone, calling someone. I need bank records for Roberto Silva, he said. Personal accounts. And I need them yesterday. He hung up, turned to me with fire in his eyes. We file an amended complaint. Add bribery to the charges. We file a motion to reopen the criminal investigation, and we tell the press everything. Won't they argue this is inadmissible, that it's from an unreliable source? I asked. They'll try, David said. But Frank's testifying. He's bringing the originals. And we're subpoenaing Silva's bank records to confirm the deposit. The check alone is damning. A personal payment from a landlord to the fire chief investigating violations at that landlord's property. Even if Silva claims it was legitimate consulting, the optics are devastating. I looked at Frank. Why? Why help us? He's your brother. Frank's eyes were red. Because 3 kids almost died. Because a good man did die. Because Gerard's going to hell anyway, and I'll be damned if I go with him for keeping his secrets. Thank you, I said. You have no idea what this means. I know exactly what it means, Frank said quietly. It means maybe those kids' parents can sleep at night. Maybe your brother's widow can stop pretending she doesn't know the truth. Maybe some good comes out of Gerard's miserable, selfish life. We filed the amended complaint on August 21st. The press exploded. Fire chief accused of taking bribes in fatal blaze case. Documents show corruption in firefighter death investigation. Hero's brother, they sold my brother's life. Roberto and Patricia's engagement announcement was buried under headlines about corruption and criminal negligence. The mayor called for an independent investigation. The district attorney announced they were reviewing evidence for potential criminal charges. The fire department put Roberto on unpaid leave pending review. And Patricia called me for the first time in 6 months. You've destroyed him, she said. No tears this time. Just cold, hard anger. You've destroyed both of us. Are you happy now? No, I said honestly. I'm not happy, but I'm closer to justice. Justice? This is revenge. This is you punishing me for moving on, punishing Roberto for trying to help, punishing everyone because you can't accept that Martin's death was an accident. It wasn't an accident, Patricia. Roberto took bribes. He delayed enforcement because Morrison paid him. Martin died because people valued money over safety. You don't know that. These so-called documents could be fabricated. Frank Morrison has an axe to grind with his brother. Everyone knows they hated each other. The check is real. Roberto deposited it. The bank records prove it. Silence. Then he said it was for consulting work. Real work. Gerard hired him to assess fire safety improvements. Do you believe that? I have to believe it, because if I don't, if Roberto really did what you're accusing him of, then I'm in love with the man who got my husband killed, and I can't live with that. Her voice broke on the last word. Patricia, I said gently, when did you know? When did you start suspecting? I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. You're not stupid. You saw the documents when we disclosed them. You read the emails. When did you start questioning whether Roberto was telling you the truth? She was crying now. I don't want to do this. You're going to have to. In 2 weeks, you'll be in a courtroom. David's going to call you as a witness. You'll be under oath. You'll have to answer these questions whether you want to or not. I'll plead the fifth. On what grounds? You're not accused of a crime. I'm his fiancée, spousal privilege. You're not married yet, and even if you were, privilege only applies to private communications. It doesn't let you lie about material facts. Then I'll refuse to testify. They can hold me in contempt. I don't care. Yes, you do. You care a lot. That's why you're calling me at midnight, crying, trying to figure out if the man you're planning to marry is a murderer. He's not a murderer. No, but he's responsible for Martin's death, and you know it. She hung up, but I could still hear her crying, even after the line went dead. 3 days before trial, the district attorney announced charges. Roberto Silva, bribery, official misconduct, criminally negligent homicide. Gerard Morrison, multiple counts of bribery, reckless endangerment, criminally negligent homicide. Jonathan Davis, official misconduct, reduced charge in exchange for cooperation. The criminal trial would come later. Our civil trial would proceed as planned. But now, with criminal charges filed, everything was different. The city's attorneys filed emergency motions to delay, arguing that proceeding with civil litigation while criminal charges were pending would prejudice their clients' Fifth Amendment rights. David opposed. The judge sided with us. Trial would proceed. They're going to take the fifth on everything, David warned. Roberto, Gerard, maybe even Davis. They won't answer questions if doing so could incriminate them. Then how do we prove our case? With documents. With Frank's testimony. With the families. We paint the picture without them. We show the jury what happened, step by step, and let them draw their own conclusions when the defendants refuse to speak. September 9th, 2025 dawned clear and cold. I wore Martin's watch. the one our father gave him when he graduated from the fire academy. Clara held my hand as we walked up the courthouse steps, past protesters with signs reading "Justice for Martin Reyes" and "Fire the Corrupt Chief." Inside, the courtroom was packed. Every seat filled, standing room only. The families, the Mendozas, the Castillos, sat in the front row behind our table. My parents sat behind them, Dad stoic as always, Mom clutching a handkerchief. Emma wasn't there. We'd decided 9 years old was too young for this, but she'd made me promise to win for Uncle Martin. Patricia sat on the defense side, alone. Roberto sat at the defendant's table with his lawyers, refusing to look at her. They'd called off the engagement. I'd heard Patricia had moved out. She looked hollowed out, a ghost of the woman who'd opened the door to me that day in April, holding my brother's medals. Gerard Morrison was absent, too sick to attend, his lawyers claimed. The judge allowed it over David's objection. The jury was seated. 12 ordinary people who would decide if my brother's death meant something or nothing, if justice was real or just a word we used to make ourselves feel better. David gave opening statements. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about choices. On November 23, 2023, Martin Reyes made a choice. When he heard there were children trapped in a burning building, he chose to run toward danger instead of away from it. He chose 3 lives he'd never met over his own. He chose to be a hero. David paused, looking at each juror. But this case is also about other choices. Choices made months before that fire. Choices made by people who valued money over safety, politics over people, convenience over lives. Gerard Morrison chose to ignore safety violations because fixing them was expensive. Roberto Silva chose to accept bribes and delay enforcement because it was profitable. Fire Marshal Davis chose to stay silent because speaking up might cost him his pension. And because of those choices, 3 children almost died. Because of those choices, Martin Reyes, a husband, a brother, a son, a man who had given 32 years of his life to protecting others, died in a building that should never have been occupied, died trying to save people from a danger that should never have existed. David walked over to our table, picked up Martin's medals from where they sat in their velvet box. These medals represent a life of service, of sacrifice, of doing the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it's dangerous, even when it costs you everything. Martin Reyes earned these medals. He earned our respect. He earned justice. And by the end of this trial, you'll see that he didn't get it. You'll see that the people responsible for his safety, for enforcing the codes that should have protected him, betrayed their oaths, betrayed the public trust. We're not here for revenge. We're here for accountability. We're here to say that when public officials take bribes, when they put money before lives, when they fail in their duties so catastrophically that people die, there must be consequences. Thank you. He sat down. The defense attorney stood, a slick corporate type named Bradley Harrison, who specialized in making guilty people look innocent. Ladies and gentlemen, Harrison began. This is a tragedy. No one disputes that. Martin Reyes was a hero. He saved 3 lives. He made the ultimate sacrifice. But being a tragedy doesn't make it a conspiracy. The plaintiffs want you to believe this was corruption, that their clients' deaths and injuries were the result of bribery and cover-ups. But what you're going to see is something much simpler, much more human: mistakes. Oversights, the kind of small failures that happen in any large bureaucracy. Did Gerard Morrison delay making repairs? Yes. Because he was struggling financially, trying to keep his business afloat during a recession. Did Roberto Silva grant extensions? Yes, because he was trying to balance safety with the practical reality that condemning the building would have displaced dozens of families, creating a homeless crisis. Were these perfect decisions? No. With hindsight, should they have acted differently? Perhaps. But that's not the same as corruption. That's not the same as criminal negligence. That's just people trying to make impossible choices in difficult circumstances. As for the allegations of bribery, you'll see that the so-called evidence comes from a disgruntled family member with a grudge, with no corroborating witnesses, no recordings, nothing but the word of a man who admits he hates his own brother. This case is being driven by grief, by a brother who can't accept that his sibling's death was a terrible accident. And grief is understandable. But we can't let grief become a weapon to destroy innocent people's lives and reputations. Thank you. He sat. The judge nodded at David. Call your first witness. The plaintiff calls Maria Mendoza. Maria took the stand in a simple blue dress, her hands trembling as she swore to tell the truth. David led her through her testimony gently. The conditions in the building, the broken smoke detectors, the complaints that went nowhere the night of the fire. Mrs. Mendoza, when you saw your daughter in Martin Reyes's arms, what did you feel? Grateful, Maria said, her voice thick with emotion. So grateful. He saved my baby. He gave her back to me. And when you learned later that he'd died, devastated, guilty, like Sophia's life had cost his, like we owed a debt we could never repay. Did anyone from the fire department tell you that Martin had filed a report about your building months before the fire? No. Did anyone tell you that the violations you'd complained about had been documented by inspectors, that deadlines for repairs had been set and then extended? No. Did anyone tell you the truth about why that building was allowed to stay open despite being dangerous? No. They just said it was an accident. Bad wiring, bad luck. They made it sound like no one could have prevented it. But it could have been prevented, couldn't it? Objection, Harrison said. Calls for speculation. I'll rephrase. Mrs. Mendoza, if the smoke detectors had been working, would you have woken up sooner? Yes. If the electrical system had been repaired, would the fire have started? No. If the building had been brought up to code or condemned, would you and your family have been living there that night? No. Thank you, Mrs. Mendoza. No further questions. Harrison's cross-examination was brutal. Mrs. Mendoza, you signed a settlement agreement with Mr. Morrison's insurance company, didn't you? Yes. For $2,000? Yes. And in that agreement, you promised not to sue anyone in connection with the fire, correct? They said we had to sign it to get the money. We had nothing. We'd lost everything. I understand. But you did sign it, didn't you? Yes, Maria whispered. And now you're here violating that agreement because Mr. Reyes convinced you that you could get more money? Objection. David was on his feet. Mischaracterizes the testimony and the facts. Sustained, rephrase, Mr. Harrison. Did Mr. Luciano Reyes approach you about joining this lawsuit? Yes, but not for money, for justice. But you are seeking monetary damages, aren't you? We're seeking the truth. Harrison smirked. No further questions. The trial continued for 3 weeks. Carlos Castillo testified about the twins' nightmares, about the fire escapes that nearly collapsed, about the fire chief who promised an investigation and then disappeared. Danny Chen testified about Martin's concerns, about the culture in the department that discouraged speaking up, about the pressure to avoid creating waves. Captain Patterson testified from Florida via video link, his voice heavy with regret as he described sending Martin's report up the chain and watching it vanish into bureaucratic oblivion. Fire Marshal Davis took the stand and promptly invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination on every substantive question. Did you receive money from Gerard Morrison? Pleading the Fifth. Did you fail to follow up on Martin Reyes's report? Pleading the Fifth. Did you prioritize political considerations over public safety? Pleading the Fifth. The jury watched him hide behind the Constitution, and I could see their opinion of him hardening with each refusal. Roberto Silva did the same, refused to answer any question that might incriminate him, sat there in his suit, jaw clenched, radiating defiance and fear. But the documents spoke for him. David put up the ledger on a screen, showed the jury line by line, payments to city officials, payments to inspectors, the payment to R. Silva. He showed the check, Gerard Morrison's signature, Roberto Silva's endorsement on the back, the deposit into Roberto's personal account. He showed the emails, the casual tone, the friendly relationship between a landlord and the fire chief who was supposed to be regulating him. Harrison fought hard, argued the ledger was unreliable, that Frank Morrison was biased, that the check could have been for legitimate consulting. Let me ask you this. Members of the jury, David said in his closing argument, If Chief Silva really was hired for legitimate fire safety consulting, why isn't there a contract? Why isn't there a report of his findings? Why was he paid in cash and personal checks instead of through proper channels? Why did he use his personal email instead of his official fire department account? The answer is simple: because it wasn't legitimate. It was a bribe, a payment to look the other way, to delay enforcement, to prioritize Gerard Morrison's financial interests over the safety of the people living in his building. And because of that bribe, Martin Reyes is dead. David pulled up a photo of Martin, not in his uniform, not at an official event, just Martin at a family barbecue, laughing, beer in hand, Emma on his shoulders. This is who they killed, not a statistic, not a headline. A man, a real person with a family who loved him, with a future that was stolen, with 3 decades of service thrown away because people valued money more than lives. You can't bring him back, but you can send a message. You can say that corruption has consequences, that betraying the public trust has consequences, that when officials fail this catastrophically, this criminally, they will be held accountable. Give Martin Reyes justice. Give his family closure. Give those 3 children the knowledge that the man who saved them mattered. Thank you. Harrison's closing was all smoke and mirrors. Attacked the evidence, attacked Frank Morrison's credibility, attacked our motives. This is a money grab, he concluded. Dressed up as justice, but really just grief-stricken family members looking for someone to blame and a payday to ease their pain. Don't let sympathy cloud your judgment. Require real proof, not conspiracy theories. Thank you. The jury got the case on October 2nd, 2025. They deliberated for 4 days. 4 days of waiting, of pacing, of Clara holding me while I tried not to fall apart, of my mother calling every hour to ask if there was news, of Emma asking if we'd won yet, of seeing Patricia in the hallway outside the courtroom, looking like she'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks, not meeting my eyes. On October 6th, at 3:47 p.m., we got the call. Verdict was in. The courtroom filled quickly. Everyone who'd been there for opening statements was back, the families clutching each other's hands, my parents' faces drawn with tension, reporters filling the gallery. Patricia came in last, sitting alone in the back row. The jury filed in. I tried to read their faces but couldn't. They looked tired, serious, but whether that meant they'd sided with us or against us, I had no idea. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor, the forewoman said. She was maybe 60, a retired teacher, someone who reminded me of Martin's 3rd-grade teacher who'd encouraged him to be brave. On the count of wrongful death, due to negligence against defendant Gerard Morrison, how do you find? We find for the plaintiffs. Relief flooded through me. 1 down. On the count of wrongful death due to negligence against defendant Roberto Silva, we find for the plaintiffs. Yes, yes. On the count of wrongful death due to negligence against the city fire department, we find for the plaintiffs. 3 for 3. On the count of bribery and corruption, this was the big one, the one that would make national news. We find that defendant Roberto Silva did accept bribes from Gerard Morrison in exchange for delaying enforcement of safety codes, and that this bribery directly contributed to the wrongful death of Martin Reyes. The courtroom erupted, people gasping, crying, shouting, the judge banging his gavel for order. As to damages, the forewoman continued once the room quieted. We award the Reyes family $4.2 million in compensatory damages and $10 million in punitive damages. We award the Mendoza family $1.5 million in compensatory damages and $3 million in punitive damages. We award the Castillo family $1.5 million in compensatory damages and $3 million in punitive damages. $23.2 million total. The largest wrongful death verdict in the city's history. But I didn't care about the money. I cared about the words, bribery directly contributed to wrongful death. They'd said it, on the record, in front of everyone. Roberto Silva had taken bribes, and Martin had died because of it. Justice. Finally, justice. I found Patricia outside the courthouse afterward. She was sitting on a bench away from the reporters and cameras, staring at nothing. I'm sorry, I said, sitting next to her. She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Are you? You just destroyed the man I love. You should be celebrating. I destroyed the man who got my brother killed. Your fiancé did that himself. He made a mistake. He took bribes. Multiple bribes. He sold his integrity for $3,000, and my brother paid for it with his life. Patricia was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. I didn't know. You have to believe me. I didn't know about any of it until the trial. He told me it was consulting work. He told me Gerard was just a friend. He told me the investigation was thorough and honest, and Martin's death was an accident that no one could have prevented. Did you believe him? I wanted to. God, I wanted to so badly. Because if he was lying, if he really did what they said, then I fell in love with the man who killed my husband. Then everything about us was built on Martin's grave. I'm sorry, I said again, and meant it this time. Don't be. You were right. About all of it, I sold those medals because I was angry at Martin for dying, for leaving me, for choosing strangers over our future. I wanted to hurt him, even though he was already gone. And Roberto, he was there. He understood grief. He made me feel less alone. I didn't ask the right questions because I didn't want to know the answers. What will you do now? I don't know. Move away, maybe. Start over somewhere no one knows me as the widow who married her husband's killer. She looked at me. Can you ever forgive me for the medals, for Roberto, for all of it? I don't know, I said honestly, but I understand why you did it. Grief makes us do terrible things, makes us into people we don't recognize. Will you tell Martin's parents? Tell them I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll tell them. She stood up, and for a moment she looked like the woman Martin had introduced us to all those years ago. Young, hopeful, full of possibility. He really did love you, I said. Martin. He talked about you all the time, about the life you were building, the family you wanted. You made him happy. I know, Patricia whispered. That's what makes this so hard, knowing I had something precious, and I threw it away because I couldn't handle the pain of losing it. She walked away then, disappearing into the crowd of people flooding out of the courthouse. I never saw her again. The criminal trial happened 6 months later. Roberto Silva pleaded guilty to bribery and criminally negligent homicide in exchange for a reduced sentence. 10 years, eligible for parole after 5. Gerard Morrison died 3 weeks before his trial was scheduled to begin. Liver failure, just like Frank predicted. He left behind a business in ruins, a family that wouldn't claim his body, and a legacy of corruption that would be studied in ethics classes for years to come. Jonathan Davis pleaded guilty to official misconduct, sentenced to 3 years probation, stripped of his pension, banned from public service for life. The mayor appointed a special commission to investigate corruption in the fire department. They found dozens of violations, hundreds of improper relationships, a culture of looking the other way that went back decades. 7 city council members resigned. The fire marshal's office was completely reorganized. New protocols were established for enforcement, for whistleblower protection, for oversight. Buildings across the city were re-inspected. 57 were found to have critical violations that had been ignored or delayed. All were brought up to code or condemned within 6 months. It wouldn't bring Martin back, but it might save the next person. 1 year after the verdict, on October 6, 2026, we held a memorial service. Not for Martin, he'd had his funeral 2 years earlier. This was for something different, something more. The city dedicated a new firefighter training facility in Martin's name, the Martin Reyes Center for Fire Safety and Ethics, a place where future firefighters would learn not just how to fight fires, but how to stand up for what's right, how to speak up when they see danger, how to refuse to be silent, even when silence is easier. The mayor gave a speech. The new fire chief, a woman brought in from outside, with a reputation for integrity, gave a speech. Danny Chen, now Captain Chen, gave a speech. And then they asked me to speak. I stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces. Firefighters in dress uniform, city officials, the families of the children Martin saved, Sophia, now 9, sitting between her parents, the twins, now 7, squirming in their seats. My parents, older and grayer, but there, Clara and Emma, holding hands. David Park, who'd become a friend as much as a lawyer. My brother Martin wasn't perfect, I began. He was stubborn. He told bad jokes. He couldn't cook to save his life, and his taste in music was questionable at best. People laughed softly. But he was a hero. Not because he died saving 3 children, though he did that. He was a hero because he tried to prevent the fire in the first place, because he filed a report when he saw danger, even knowing it might be ignored, because he spoke up when it would have been easier to stay silent. That's what real heroism is. Not just the dramatic moments when the cameras are rolling, but the small, everyday choices to do what's right, even when it costs you, even when no one will thank you, even when you know it might not matter. Martin made those choices every day of his career, and in the end, yes, he made the ultimate choice. He ran into a burning building, and he didn't come out. But that choice only mattered because all the other choices, the ones no one saw, the ones that didn't make headlines, had prepared him to make it. This center bears his name, but it represents something bigger than one man. It represents the idea that we can do better, that we can build systems that protect people instead of failing them, that we can create a culture where speaking up is rewarded instead of punished, where doing the right thing doesn't cost you everything. Martin died believing in that idea, died believing that people mattered more than politics, more than money, more than convenience, and I hope that what happened after his death proved him right, that the corruption and negligence that killed him has been exposed and punished, that real change is happening. I pulled out the velvet box, opened it to show Martin's medals gleaming under the lights. These medals mean something. They mean a life of service, of sacrifice, of courage. They mean that one man stood between danger and innocence and chose to be the shield. But they also mean something else now. They mean accountability, justice, the knowledge that when systems fail, when people betray their oaths, there will be consequences. I looked at Sophia, at the twins. 3 children are alive today because of Martin. 3 children who will grow up, have families of their own, contribute to the world in ways we can't even imagine yet. That's his legacy. Not just the dramatic rescue, but everything that came after. The investigations, the trials, the reforms, the lives saved by buildings being brought up to code. All of it stemming from his courage. My voice broke. Clara was crying. My mother was crying. Half the audience was crying. I miss my brother every day, every single day. And I'm angry that he's gone, that he died for preventable reasons, that corruption stole him from us. But I'm also proud, proud that he mattered, proud that his death meant something, proud that this building will train thousands of firefighters to be like him, brave, ethical, unwilling to compromise when lives are at stake. Martin would have hated having a building named after him. He'd have been embarrassed by the attention, but he'd have loved what it represents. The idea that we can learn from tragedy, that we can honor the dead by protecting the living. I held up the medals one last time. These don't belong in a box. They don't belong hidden away. They belong here in this center, where every firefighter who trains here will see them and remember what they mean. Will remember Martin Reyes, will remember that being a hero isn't about glory, it's about service, it's about sacrifice. It's about making the hard choices because they're right, not because they're easy. Thank you, Martin, for everything you gave, everything you taught us, everything you were. We'll make sure it wasn't in vain. After the ceremony, after the photos and handshakes and carefully worded congratulations, I stood alone in front of the glass case where they'd mounted Martin's medals. 3 pieces of metal, on blue ribbon, such small things to represent such a big life. Someone came to stand beside me. I looked over. It was Sophia. 9 years old now, taller, braces on her teeth, but still those same serious eyes. Mr. Reyes, she said softly. Hi, Sophia. My mom says I should thank you for everything you did, for making sure people knew the truth. You don't have to thank me. I want to, because of you. I know Uncle Martin didn't die for nothing. That's what my mom calls him. Uncle Martin, she says he's watching over me from heaven. I'm sure he is. Sophia looked at the medals. Do you think he knows about this building? About the trial? About everything? I hope so. Me too. Because I want him to know that I'm going to make it count. that I'm going to live a life that's worth what he gave. I'm going to help people like he did. Maybe I'll be a firefighter too, or a doctor, or a teacher. But whatever I do, I'm going to make sure it matters. I looked down at this child my brother died for, this serious, thoughtful 9-year-old who understood more about sacrifice than most adults ever would. He'd like that, I said. He'd like that a lot. Sophia hugged me then, quick and fierce, and ran back to her parents. I stood there alone, looking at those medals, and for the first time in 2 years I felt something other than rage or grief. I felt peace. Not happiness that would take longer, might never fully come, but peace with the choices I'd made, peace with the fight I'd fought, peace with the outcome. Martin was gone. Nothing would change that. But his death had meant something, had exposed corruption, saved lives, created lasting change. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Epilogue. 5 years later, October 6th, 2031. I stood in the cemetery, looking at Martin's headstone, black granite with gold lettering. Martin Alejandro Rise, 1976 to 2023. Beloved son, USB brother, Ewan Sill, Harrow. There were fresh flowers already there. There always were. Sometimes from our parents, sometimes from Clara and Emma, sometimes from families we didn't know, people Martin had helped over the years, people who remembered. Today's flowers were from Sophia. She was 14 now, top of her class, volunteering at the fire department's community outreach program, already talking about college, about med school, about saving lives. The twins were thriving too. No more nightmares, just two normal 12-year-old boys who played soccer and argued over video games, and sometimes quietly left flowers for the uncle they'd never really known, but whose sacrifice had given them everything. My parents were getting older. Dad's health was failing, heart problems, the doctor said, though I thought it was more accurately a broken heart that had never healed. Mom had finally forgiven me, finally understood why I'd fought so hard. She kept a framed photo of Martin in his dress uniform on her mantel, next to the medals I'd given her after the center was dedicated. Patricia had moved to Oregon, remarried, I'd heard, to a teacher, someone safe and boring and uncomplicated. I hoped she was happy. I hoped she'd found peace. Roberto Silva got out on parole after serving 4 years, moved to another state, kept his head down, lived quietly. The fire service had a long memory. He'd never work in public safety again. The city had paid the full judgment plus interest. Most of it went to trust funds for the families, to scholarships in Martin's name, to fire safety initiatives. We kept enough to be comfortable, to secure Emma's future, but we didn't need millions. Didn't want them. This was never about money. Emma was 14, now too. She barely remembered Uncle Martin, but she knew his story, knew about the medals, the trial, the center that bore his name. She wore a small silver firefighter's badge on a chain around her neck, a gift from Danny Chen on her 13th birthday. So you'll remember Danny had said that being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right even when you are. Clara was here with me today, her hand in mine. 20 years of marriage, 15 since Martin died. We'd survived the obsession, the trial, the dark years when I couldn't see past my rage. She'd held me together when I was falling apart, reminded me who I was when I was becoming someone else. You did good, she said softly, reading my thoughts like she always did. He'd be proud. I hope so. I know so. Look what came from his death. The buildings that were fixed, the laws that were changed, the firefighters trained at his center, the lives saved because people learned to speak up. That's his legacy, not the corruption that killed him, but everything good that came after. She was right. I knew she was right. But I still wished he was here. Wished I could call him on the phone, hear his laugh, argue about nothing, watch him throw Emma in the air and catch her like he used to when she was little. Wished he'd gotten to see 48, 50, 60. Gotten to retire and tell long, boring stories about the old days. Gotten to be a father himself, to hold his own children, to grow old and gray and annoying. Wished he'd gotten to live. But wishing wouldn't change anything. All I could do was honor what he'd given, continue the work he'd started, make sure his sacrifice meant something. I love you, hermano, I said to the headstone. And I'm sorry, sorry it took your death to fix a broken system. Sorry you had to be the price we paid for change. Sorry for all the years you won't get to live. But I promise you, everyone knows your name now. Everyone knows what you did. And everyone knows that corruption and negligence have consequences. You changed the world, Martin. Even in dying, you changed it. I placed my hand on the cold granite. Rest easy, brother. Your work here is done, and we'll make sure it continues. Clara and I walked back to the car hand in hand. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, beautiful and bittersweet, like everything about Martin's story. Behind us, the metals in the glass case at the training center caught the last light of day, gleaming like promises kept, like justice served, like a hero remembered. And somewhere, I hoped, Martin was watching, seeing what his courage had created, knowing that his life and his death had mattered, knowing he was loved. Always. The end